Welcome to Creepy Vibes. On July 4th, 2025, Central Texas was hit by one of the deadliest flash floods in history. The Guadalupe River rose over 20 feet in less than 2 hours. Towns disappeared. Homes washed away. More than 100 people died. Many are still missing. But what stayed behind were the voices. People in Kerr County and New Braunfels say they've seen lights moving under the water. They've heard church bells ringing deep below the surface. And some have heard laughter in streets that no longer exist. Tonight, we're telling you about 20 real Texas towns that drowned overnight and didn't stay dead. Some were lost years ago, others just last week. Don't think it's just the water you should fear, because when a town dies suddenly, something always stays behind. Before we begin, hit subscribe. Don't wait. You might miss what comes next. Now, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. Let's begin. The road to Old Driftwood barely exists anymore. Even before the flood, it was just a broken ribbon of gravel and dying asphalt that twisted through the trees like a scar that never quite healed. People forgot about it. Maybe they wanted to. It wasn't marked on most maps, and if you asked folks in Blanco or Wimberley, they'd either shrug or change the subject. Some would tell you it washed away a long time ago during that freak flood in the early 90s when the Blanco River rose higher than it ever had, dragging trees, trucks, and entire porches downstream like paper toys. But that's not when it really died. Old Driftwood died long before that, quietly, and by its own hand. The flood just erased what was left, but one building survived. I heard about the Siren House from a guy named Lance, who used to run Toad, near Canyon Lake. We were at a dive bar, 2 pitchers deep, the kind of night where everybody's mouth runs a little too loose. He was already drunk when he leaned over and said, "You know about the house that sings when it floods?" At first, I thought he meant it metaphorically, some poetic way of describing wood groaning or metal shifting under pressure. But then, he got real serious, like stone cold sober serious, and said, "No, I mean it sings. You hear it just as the water touches your boots. And if you're not careful, you won't hear anything ever again." I didn't believe him. Not really. But I didn't forget either. Especially not after the summer I lost my job, my lease, and thanks to an expired registration, my truck, all in the same damn month. By August, I was sleeping in a borrowed tent and trying to decide whether pride was worth the pain in my gut. That's when I remembered Lance's story. And like something calling me in a voice I couldn't hear but felt, I found myself driving a borrowed Civic through the hill country, heading toward the river. It took 3 tries to find the turnoff. No signs, no markers, just a split in the trees and a gravel rut that looked like it had been chewed up by the devil himself. I followed it for 6 miles, maybe more, until I came to the riverbank. The water was low that day, bone dry season, but you could see the line on the trees, where it rose when it got angry. There was a smell too. Not just mud and algae, but something underneath it, like mold on old books, like rot that had dried and waited. I saw the house across the river. It wasn't what I expected. No Victorian towers or spooky iron gates. Just a small single-story farmhouse sitting atop a slab of limestone that jutted out like a chin daring the river to strike again. It had a porch that leaned a little to the right, one shutter missing, the others hanging like broken limbs. And windows far too many for a house that size. 6 on the front wall alone. All shut. All dark. But there was something wrong with the silence. It wasn't silent at all. There was a hum. So faint it could have been your own blood in your ears, but it wasn't. It had a pattern. It rose and fell like someone humming through a locked door. I stood there on the edge of the bank, heart crawling up my throat, trying to decide whether to cross. I didn't have to. That's the part that bothers me the most. I didn't need to get any closer. I could hear it just fine from where I was, but I wanted to. I needed to. Like it reached into that part of me where hope used to live and said, just a little closer, and you won't feel empty anymore. I stepped into the riverbed. It wasn't deep. The water barely touched my shins, but every step made the sound. Louder, not sharper, not clearer, just ... closer, like I was walking into someone's mouth as they whispered through teeth. The house didn't get bigger, but it felt like it did. Every inch I closed, it seemed to lean in toward me. I was halfway across when I heard the second sound, a breath, not mine, not wind, a soft, sucking inhale like lungs that had waited too long to fill. It came from the house. And then the humming stopped. I froze. I wasn't in water anymore. I was. In shadow, I looked up. The sun was gone, blotted out by a slow-moving cloud that I swear hadn't been there 5 seconds earlier. The house stared at me. Not metaphorically. I mean, I felt it. Like every window had an eye behind it. Some were sad. Others, not so much. Then the porch creaked. The boards moved just a little. Enough to let me know someone or something was home. I should have turned back. I should have run. But the air was thick with something I can only call promise. Not warmth or comfort, just the raw, aching promise that if I took a few more steps, everything would make sense again. The losses, the silence, the ache in my bones. That house promised to explain it all. I don't know how else to put it. I got within 10 feet before I heard my name, not out loud, not whispered, but inside. Like someone said it directly behind my eardrum, and it bypassed my skin, my brain, my nerves. Just straight into me, Jesse. One word, soft. Like a song finishing its last note. I backed up. The humming returned, louder now. But this time it had words. I see you. I see you. I see you, over and over. Over and over. Each repetition closer than the last. Not screamed. Not shouted, but sung. I turned and ran. The water wasn't water anymore. It was thick, grabbing. Every step I took, something pulled at my ankles. Not current. Hands. Small ones. Thin ones. I swear to God, one of them held on longer than it should have. Like it didn't want me to leave. I hit the opposite bank and kept running until the sound vanished. I don't know how long I was out there. The sun was high again when I stopped. The car was right where I left it. Windows fogged. Engine still. Ticking from the drive out. And on the passenger seat something I didn't bring. A Polaroid. Not just old-aged. The kind of yellow-stained photo that looks like it's been sitting in a box since the 70s. It was me, standing in front of that house. But not today. The clothes were wrong. The car behind me wasn't the Civic. It was a truck I sold back in 2013. And my expression? I was smiling, wide, full, like I'd just been found after being lost for years. I never told Lance what happened. Never told anyone, really. Just went home, packed my tent, and left the hill country. Haven't been back. But some nights usually, when it rains, I hear humming through the pipes. I try not to listen, because I know how it ends. If you get too close, you drown standing up. They say the water at Lake Phantom runs deeper than the maps admit. I always thought that was just small-town folklore, a way to scare kids from swimming too far, or maybe a poetic excuse for all the drownings over the years. Folks around Wichita. Falls like their ghost stories almost as much as their barbecues, but they talk about that lake like it's sacred and cursed in the same breath. You grow up hearing whispers. How it was never meant to be a lake. How something old, something holy was buried there before the water came. Not just any building, but a church. Not just any graveyard, but one that still calls. I never believed any of it until that August afternoon. I wasn't even supposed to be at Lake Phantom. I'd come down from Amarillo to visit my brother Eddie, who'd been on disability after a roofing accident. He lived near Henrietta, and the only thing he talked about these days was fishing. Said it gave him peace. Said there was a spot by the old boat launch on the lake's northern bend where the fish practically leapt into your cooler. I didn't argue. My job at the time was falling apart, and I needed the silence more than I admitted. So I agreed. Took the Friday off, packed a cooler full of beer, and followed Eddie's dusty old Tacoma down 2 hours of sun-bleached roads to a lake that wasn't on most tourist brochures for a reason. We set up near the tree line around 4 p.m. Not many people were out. A few locals launching aluminum john boats, maybe 1 or 2 kids splashing near the edge, but mostly it was just us and the water. The heat sat heavy on our necks, the air still except for the occasional distant whine of cicadas. Eddie showed me how to cast with his backup rod. We talked about everything and nothing. His kids, my divorce, the house our parents died in and how neither of us wanted it, but neither of us could let go of it either. I don't remember who brought up the bell first. Might have been him. Or maybe I noticed the sound before my mind knew how to name it. It came just after sundown. A dull, warbled chime that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was tinnitus, maybe from too many beers or the low hum of crickets and frogs playing tricks. But then I saw Eddie freeze. He turned his head like a deer, catching a scent. His eyes locked onto the water. The ripples were calm, but there was something underneath them. The sound came again, clearer this time, unmistakable. A bell. Faint and slow, like it was swinging underwater. I looked up, scanning for some church. Steeple hidden in the trees, maybe some local chapel whose sound had carried strange across the lake. But there was nothing on the shoreline but brush, flat land, and old barbed wire fences. No towers, no spires. Just that sound again, deep and dragging, like the rope had grown moss over the years but still pulled tight when the hour turned. Eddie didn't speak. He stood, rod in hand, but his line was slack and drifting. His face had gone pale. Then he said something I'll never forget. They never moved the graves. I thought he was joking, but his voice didn't have that tone. He said the town that used to sit where the lake is now Old Barrett, I think he called it, had a church at the center. The government paid the residents to evacuate in the 1940s, flooded the town to build a reservoir. Most of the buildings were dismantled, foundations cracked and buried, but the church, he said, was too old, too stubborn. The steeple collapsed, and the graveyard behind it was left to drown. The bell used to ring for service, Eddie said, not looking at me, but they never took it down. Never got the bodies out. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It sounded ridiculous. But Eddie didn't. He stared at the lake like he was seeing something no one else could. Then he packed up. Just like that. Reeled in his line, shut the tackle box, and told me to follow him. He didn't sleep that night. I stayed on his couch, tossing and turning. Every creak of the floorboards made my ears ring. I told myself the sound was wind. Some metal pipe in the lake. A boat's loose chain. That's all it could have been. But it stayed with me. 2 nights later, I went back. I didn't tell Eddie. Didn't want another lecture about what lies beneath. I just needed to prove to myself that it was nothing. That it was all beer and memory. I took his spare rod and a lantern, drove the Tacoma out past midnight, and parked near the same tree line. The air was thicker this time. Dead calm. Even the bugs seemed to hold their breath. I cast my line, let it drift. The moon was out big and bloated over the trees. The surface of the lake looked like glass, black and bottomless. Then came the sound. The bell. Clearer than before. It rang 3 times. Slow. Each note longer than the last. The final toll seemed to hang in the air, vibrating through my spine like it had been meant for me all along. That's when I saw the shape. Out. In the center of the lake far beyond where any boat should have been, there was a shimmer of something upright, like a spire. A narrow triangle poking just above the surface. It looked wrong, like it wasn't part of the water, like it had no reflection. I stood up, heart hammering. The lantern flickered. The air dropped a few degrees. Then I heard the splash. Something heavy broke the water behind me, maybe 20 yards. To the left. I spun. Nothing. Another splash, this time on the right. Still nothing. Then I heard footsteps. Sloshing, slow, like someone walking in mud. But I was alone. The smell hit me next. Damp earth, rotting flowers, and something like candle wax and wet iron. The scent of a church funeral. Sunken swamp water. And then I saw them. Figures. Rising from the lake, one by one. They didn't make waves. They didn't breathe. Just slowly emerged suits, veils, lace, buttons, collars, all black, all dripping, all silent. One held a book. One clutched a bouquet of bones. Another raised a long rope, and behind them, between the shapes, I saw a door. Half open. A wooden church door under the lake. Light spilled from the crack yellow. Flickering, impossible. The bell rang again. I don't remember running. I just remember the sound of my boots hitting dry dirt, my hands cut and shaking from brambles, and the Tacoma's headlights burning like salvation in the dark. I drove blind, speeding through curves and dust until the lake was behind me, and the ringing finally stopped. I told Eddie. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded and poured me a glass of whiskey. I told you, he said. Some graves don't stay quiet. I haven't been back to Lake Phantom since, not even close. I moved to Oregon, found peace in the mountains, started painting again. But sometimes, when it's quiet, when the wind dies and the night sits too still, I swear I hear it. The bell, tolling deep, beneath it all. Calling. They say nobody left Port Vale. That was the headline printed in the Austin paper 3 weeks after the river swallowed it whole. The Guadalupe rose like it had a mind of its own, bloated from days of ceaseless rain, breaking its banks with a force that hadn't been seen in decades. Most towns along its stretch had at least a warning. Some even had time to stack sandbags or toss belongings into pickups and head uphill. But not Port Vale. Not that quiet little bend in the woods with its forgotten general store, half paved. Streets and white-clapboard houses all wrapped in the thick breath of pine. Nobody heard a call for evacuation, no sirens, no alerts, no knock on doors. When the water came, it came fast, like something was trying to take that town in one gulp. The first thing people noticed was the silence. There were no 911 calls from Port Vale. No social media posts, no texts, no SOS signals. Just silence. People downstream, in places like Cuero and Thomaston, started asking why Port Vale hadn't showed up in the emergency shelters. That's what drew the search crews. A team of 5 volunteers. And 2 FEMA men pushed up the river in a flat-bottomed boat after the rain let up. They expected devastation. Maybe a few bodies snagged in fences or trees. What they didn't expect was what they found. Every home untouched by outside force, as if no one had struggled. No broken windows, no torn-out screen doors. Everything was just closed. Every house, every trailer, every back shed. Locked from the inside. And then there were the candles, still burning. The official report said it was anomalous but not unprecedented. That's government talk for, we don't know what the hell this is. Some houses had thick beeswax candles burning clean and steady. Others had stubby votives in glass cups that flickered as if someone had just walked out of the room. One place even had a dinner table set, pot roast gone to rot, forks placed just so. In all that water, in all that mud, not one candle was snuffed out. Even the ones right by cracked windows or in homes that had clearly taken on some flooding. No soot marks, no fire damage. Just flame. I didn't know Port Vale personally, but I knew someone who did. My Uncle Garrett used to haul timber out of the pine curtain, and he told me he stopped by Port Vale once a month for years. It was one of those towns you didn't find unless you were looking for it, or unless someone told you where it was. You could blink and miss the turnoff, he'd say. Dirt road lined with old cedar, twisted like veins under the canopy. He said the folks there were kind, but private. Always seemed like they were waiting for something, or watching the sky. You'd never see kids playing, never hear dogs barking. Just grown folks moving real slow, always barefoot on their porches, like they were listening for something under the ground. He went quiet the first time he heard what the FEMA boys found. Said nothing for a week. Then one night, after a bottle and a half of wild turkey, he told me the real reason he stopped going back. He said it was the church. Port Vale had this chapel that didn't match the rest, of the town black stone instead of white clapboard, and no windows at all. It had no name either. No cross on top, no steeple, just a bell tower with a narrow slit where the bell would swing, but he swore he never heard it ring. Inside it was darker than a cave and always smelled like wet ash. The pews were carved with symbols he couldn't make sense of. Not Latin, not anything he saw in his years. No one ever went in when he was there, and yet the candles on the altar were always lit. Always. He said one time, just before he quit driving that route, he delivered lumber to the town's edge, and a boy, maybe 6 or 7, came up barefoot, soaked even though it hadn't rained. The kid stared at him and asked, "Did you bring the wood for our boxes?" Garrett said no, confused, and the boy looked over his shoulder at the chapel and said, "We're building new ones." For underneath. That was his last trip. I went there myself last year. Took my recorder, my camera, my maps. I wanted answers, or maybe I just wanted to see if something real could explain the stories. When I finally found the road unpaved, half eaten by weeds, I followed it into the trees for what felt like an hour. And then, there was Port Vale, exactly as described. Empty, not destroyed, not washed away, just vacant. Like every soul had stepped outside for a moment and would return at any second. Some curtains moved in the breeze. A rocking chair creaked slowly. I walked through maybe 12 houses, each one locked from the inside. I had to crawl through a busted cellar window to get into one. Inside was neat, almost staged. But I'll never forget the smell burnt oil, DMP stone, and something sickly sweet, like fruit gone to rot in a closed jar. And the candles still burning, weeks, maybe months later. It didn't make sense. Not just the wax being untouched, but the way the flames moved. Not upward like you'd expect, but kind of sideways, like the air itself bent around them. I filmed it. I lit my own candle next to one of theirs. Mine flickered and danced with the wind. Theirs never moved. Just burned cold and clean, like it wasn't made of fire at all. I stayed until dusk. That's when the ringing started. Not loud at first. Just a low tone, distant, like a bell tolling underwater. I turned off all my gear, held my breath. It came again, clearer now, closer. A deep metallic clang that echoed against nothing and made the back of my teeth ache. I followed the sound through brush and low thorns until I came to the chapel. It stood just as Garrett described it. Stone blacker than night, no windows, no door, not anymore. The frame was splintered open, like something had come through from the inside. I stepped into the dark and the sound stopped, just stopped, like it had never been there. My flashlight flickered, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I can't explain. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the feeling that I had never been alone. I wasn't supposed to be there. Wasn't supposed to see. In the middle of the chapel was a hole. Not a trapdoor, not a cellar. A pit, wide and black, swallowing all light. Around it were more candles, hundreds of them, each stuck into a small wooden box. Coffin-sized. Some child-sized. And etched into the wood was that same strange script Garrett described. They weren't burning down. None of them. I heard the bell again, but this time not from the tower. From below. Something was moving down there. Breathing. I ran. I tripped. I scraped my arm on stone, but I got out. I left everything. My camera, my gear, my notes, everything but the recorder in my pocket. That night in my motel room 2 counties over, I played it back. There were the sounds of my footsteps, the wind, the rustle of trees. Then the bell. Then the silence. Then the whisper. One voice, clear as glass. We never left. I burned the recorder. I told myself it was just interference, a trick of my exhausted brain. But I haven't slept right since. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. Port Vale didn't drown. It was taken. And whatever took it is still there. Waiting. It started the way most things do in this part of Texas, quietly, with the heat sitting on your skin like wet wool and the bugs humming just below the threshold of madness. I had just turned 40 and was back in Darlington for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The town didn't technically exist anymore, not since the Army Corps of Engineers dammed the creek and let Lake Maribel rise up and swallow it whole back in '83. My uncle used to say you could still hear dogs barking under the water some nights, like they didn't know they were dead yet. They relocated everyone, gave out checks and promises, but not everyone got out. The Devlins didn't, and every July, like clockwork, the stories would start again. Old-timers said a house showed up in the shallows off the eastern cove, just beyond the willow break. Not the ones you could see underwater on a clear day there. Were plenty of those, just foundations and walls crusted over in green slime and algae. No, this was a whole damn house. Slanted, half-submerged, but real, with a porch. And curtains that moved like someone was watching. They called it the third house because on the original Darlington Township records, it sat third on Ridgeway Lane, between the Lipton place and the Hernando family's trailer lot. Devlins lived their mom, dad, and 3 kids. All of them. Gone before the water came. My cousin Ray and I had grown up hearing the stories, usually from someone with a cigarette in one hand and a beer in the other. Most of it we shrugged off. But that summer, when the drought hit and the lake's waterline dipped for the first time in years, people got spooked, not scared spooked. Like the kind of quiet that makes even the barflies whisper. You could see it in the way folks wouldn't linger past sunset, how kids weren't allowed near the boat ramp anymore. And then Ray called me, said, "It's back, the house." Saw it this morning when I was out fishing near the cove. I didn't believe him. Not until I saw it myself. It was July 10th, 2 days before my birthday. The sun was just starting to come down, turning the lake to bronze. We took his old John boat out, motor coughing, cooler sloshing against our legs. The water smelled like copper and something else I couldn't place, like mildew and spoiled milk. We rounded the point, past the broken pier where we used to fish with our granddad, and there it was. A house. Not a ruin, not a trick of light. A house. Slanted like it had risen through the lake bed at an angle, its porch half buried in reeds and still water. The boards were soaked black and rotted at the edges. But the windows, God help me, the windows were clear, clean, and the curtains inside stirred like someone had just brushed past them. A breeze rolled across the lake then, but it was dry. And hot. Not enough to move anything. Ray cut the motor and we drifted closer. My heartbeat thudded like a kick drum in my chest. I smelled something, then something wrong. Wood smoke and burnt hair. It was so faint you'd miss it if you breathed wrong, but once you caught it, it hung in your throat like guilt. I'm telling you, man, Ray whispered, even though we were the only ones for miles. They say the house comes back every year, but only at night. Then by morning, it's gone. I asked who they were, but he just shook his head. We sat in the stillness for a long while, watching the house. Like it might blink. The water lapped at the boards, and I swear it sounded like breathing. There was something wrong about the place, not just because it shouldn't be there. It didn't feel like a house. It felt like a memory one you didn't want but couldn't. Get rid of. Ray said he was going to tie off on a low beam and climb onto the porch. I told him he was out of his damn mind. But he was already pulling the rope, looping it around what looked like an old porch column. He stood, stepped out of the boat like it was the most natural thing in the world, and set his boots down on the wetwood. That's when the door creaked open. Not fast, not loud, just slow. Like someone inside had been waiting and finally decided. We'd earned a peek. Ray turned to me, grinning like a fool. Come on, you always were the chicken. Let's see what's inside. I should have left. I should have untied the boat and let the lake take him. But I didn't. I followed. Because that's what you do when someone you love walks into the dark. You follow. Even if you don't believe in ghosts. Especially if you don't. The floor sagged under us, and our steps made the kind of wet-sucking sound that turns your stomach. The air inside was still, heavy. Dust didn't move, like it was glued in place. The walls were water-stained but intact. There was furniture, real furniture. A plaid couch, a rocking chair, a dining table with 5 places set and mold growing on the plates like the meal had been served last week. Not 40 years ago. Ray wandered into what must have been the kitchen while I stood frozen in the entry. My eyes drifted toward the staircase. There were handprints on the railing. Small ones. Wet. I called out to Ray, but he didn't answer. I heard the creak of cabinets opening, a rustle like old paper. Then silence. A second passed. Then another. Then I heard humming, a child's voice. Sweet, high-pitched. Just a tune, no words. I turned toward the hallway, and that's when I saw the shadow move across the far end of the room. It was shaped like a child, but it didn't move like one. It floated, just an inch off the floor, knees stiff, arms down. And the eyes, they weren't even eyes. Just holes, wide and dark and full of something that understood suffering. I backed toward the door, my feet slipping on the wet wood. I called for Ray again, louder this time, but the only answer I got was the scraping sound of a chair dragging across the floor upstairs. I ran. Didn't care if he followed. Didn't look back. I hit the porch and leapt into the boat, untying. The rope with shaking hands. The motor wouldn't start. I yanked the cord again and again while the house loomed behind me, that door still wide open. I saw something moving inside. Something tall now. Taller than any human should be, hunched in a way that suggested bones had grown wrong. Then Ray screamed. I still dream about that scream. Not because it was loud, but because of how it ended, like someone cut a string. Just gone. I started paddling. Didn't stop until I was halfway across the lake. When I looked back, the house was gone. Just water and reeds. Like it had never been there. The next morning, I went to the sheriff. Told him everything. He didn't laugh. Just nodded slowly and asked, "What day was it?" "July 10th. I said. He stared past me for a long time. "Third house always comes back around then. You're not the first to lose someone in it. You won't be the last." They never found Ray. Not a body, not a boot. His truck still parked at the bait shop. His house sits empty. And every year, right around July 10th, Folks say the house returns. Just for a night, same spot. Some say it's looking for the Devlins. Others say it's full now and looking for more. Me? I stay away from the lake. But sometimes, when the wind is just right and the air tastes like mildew and smoke, I swear I hear a door creak open, and a voice familiar and wrong whispering my name from somewhere far below the surface. It started in Burnley, just north of where Mon Hollow used to sit before the reservoir swallowed it in '93. The water came in fast after that dam project, the one the state insisted would protect the hill country from flood devastation. They said Mon Hollow had to be sacrificed, said it wasn't safe sitting in the low pocket between those cedar-covered ridges. The residents were given a few months to clear out, but not all of them left. That was the first thing nobody talked about. The town was emptied on paper, sure, but anyone from around here knows there were a few old-timers who refused to pack up and go. Some out of pride, others out of fear. A couple folks just didn't believe the water would ever rise that high. I remember one man, Gerald Pope, who swore he'd sit on his porch with his shotgun and rock back and forth till either God or the county came to move him. No one did. One day the town was there, and the next it wasn't. The hollow was gone, sitting beneath a still, man-made lake that shimmered like oil in the Texas sun. The whispers started years later. At first, it was dismissed as rust or air in the pipes. A few homeowners near Burnley's edge close to where the new reservoir supply lines ran said they could hear faint noises when they turned on their taps late at night. Not running water. Not air. Voices. Sometimes muttering. Sometimes crying. Sometimes one long dragging moan that seemed to come from deep inside the plumbing. The county water office wrote it off as pressure issues. Gurgling. Said it was nothing. Said the acoustics of modern piping systems sometimes made sounds bounce and echo, but more people started hearing it, especially when the summer heat rolled in and the air was still and heavy, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and clogs your breath, the kind of heat that feels old, like it's been waiting underground for something. By 2015, folks in Burnley and neighboring New Chapel were filing reports. Kids in one trailer park were too scared to use the bathroom after sundown because they swore the sink talked back to them. An elderly woman on Walnut Drive left her hose running for hours, just to drown out the sound of someone whispering her name from the drain. Some people went to the news, but the local station barely covered it, maybe 30 seconds of fluff followed by a chuckle from the anchor. Then the family on Finch Street disappeared. The Claybrooks. Nice folks. Didn't make much noise. Lived in a one-story blue rancher just 3 blocks from the edge of the reservoir's distribution zone. Neighbors said they'd been complaining about the sound in their pipes for weeks. Said the wife, Laura, was going crazy trying to record it. Sighed she believed the water was trying to communicate. Then one night, they were just gone. Lights on. Dinner on the table. Door wide open. No signs of struggle. Except the tub in the hallway bathroom was full to the brim, and the water wouldn't stop flowing no matter what the fire department tried. They drained the system, replaced the mains, rerouted flow, installed brand new regulators. None of it helped. The whispering got worse. A high school janitor in New Chapel found a freshman girl crouched under the locker room sink, humming the words. She said she heard every night at home, "We're still down here. We never left." A man who worked maintenance for the City Ray Harbinger quit after he claimed something spoke to him through the storm drain as he flushed one of the old mains near Route 17. He didn't say what it told him. Just came back to the truck shaking, soaked in sweat, eyes wide like he'd seen a dead loved one, and said he wouldn't go near anything connected to Mon Hollow's line again. Moved to Amarillo and never looked back. By 2019, it wasn't just whispers. People were seeing things. One man, a school bus driver named Lloyd Pierce, swore he saw a full set of muddy footprints leading from his kitchen sink to the back door. Said he lived alone. The water district checked his plumbing. Everything was fine. No leaks, no pressure bursts. But Lloyd had the prints photographed, big human prints. Bare feet, wet, except they weren't dripping across the floor. It was like the water had come from under the floorboards. More towns started noticing strange things after the hollow's water began reaching farther. Kenmore, Yancey Ridge, even parts of Clifton Hollow. Always the same pattern. Voices, then disappearances, then sightings. Some started leaving their faucets running all day just so they wouldn't have to hear the noise when it started at night. One woman taped up every drain in her house and brushed her teeth with bottled water. Didn't help. She said the sound came from behind the walls now, like someone dragging their fingers through the pipes. I knew something was deeply wrong when they shut down the Hollowview water station for inspection, and the crew never came back. 7 men went in. 2 came out. They wouldn't speak. Not to reporters, not to family. One slit his wrists 3 months later in a hotel bathroom off I-35. The other still lives in a home without running water, out in the desert 30 miles from the nearest plumbing line. The county doesn't talk about Mont Hollow anymore, but they're still using the water. Quietly, carefully. They don't tell new residents that their homes sit on distribution routes leading back to a drowned town filled with locked doors and unanswered questions. I've heard it myself. Once, last August, I rented a trailer near the edge of town after a job fell through. Cheap place. Half a mile from the burn-scarred ridge where Mont Hollow's rooftops used to peek through the trees in old postcards. I was washing dishes when I heard something from the drain. At first, I thought it was static. Then it turned into voices. Not one. Many. They weren't loud, just ... steady. Constant. Like a chorus repeating a prayer under their breath. Some crying. Some gasping. Some begging. And one very clearly said, "Don't drink." I haven't since stopped most folks around here. Either leave or go crazy trying to prove what they're hearing. I've started recording like Laura Claybrook did. I've got hours of it now, but when I play the audio back, there's nothing but silence. You have to hear it in real time. The water doesn't want to be remembered, just witnessed. Like it needs you to feel it, to understand, to fear it. Some say the dam wasn't just about flood control, that the project had other motives, that what really happened in Mont Hollow, what the government covered up, was buried under 20 feet of water and cemented in silence. Maybe. There was something in that town, some truth, some secret. Maybe they thought drowning it would end the story, but stories don't drown. They find new ways to be told. Sometimes they scream through the pipes. She came to my door the night the rain turned the gravel to sludge and the wind tore shingles from the roof like it had a personal vendetta. I remember the exact moment because the news had just shifted from tornado warnings to flash flood advisories. My dog, Jasper, had curled under the recliner like he always did when the sky started growling, and the power had flickered for the 3rd time. Then came the knock. Not a desperate banging, not a neighbor in panic or a drunk friend trying to remember which trailer was mine. Just a gentle knock dash, knock dash, knock. 3 times. Polite. Like someone not in any rush. At first, I thought maybe it was Sue from down the lane. Her son had been caught lighting firecrackers under old Mr. Blanton's porch last week, and she was still making her rounds apologizing. But when I pulled the door open, the wind damn near ripped it from my hand, and she was just standing there, thin, soaking wet, barefoot on the muddy gravel, and wearing this light blue nightgown that clung to her like a second skin. Her long, Dark hair stuck to her face and neck like riverweed, and she had these pale eyes that didn't blink even when the wind threw rain right into them. "Do you know the way to Elkins Bay?" she asked, soft as cotton but with a weird drawl. Not local. Not like anything I'd heard in this part of Texas anyway. Like maybe Alabama or older maybe. "Elkins Bay?" I repeated, trying to piece together where I'd heard that name before. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it in the map of backroads in my head. She nodded once, real slow. "I'm trying to get home." Jasper whimpered, low and pitiful, and I felt something cold wash over me, colder than the rain. Like the kind of cold you feel when you step into a basement that hasn't seen sunlight in decades. I don't remember what I mumbled. Maybe something like, "I think it's further south." Maybe I didn't say anything at all. I just remember
blinking and she was gone.
no footsteps, no retreating figure down the lane. Just gone. And where she'd stood, there was only a puddle, rippling like something had disturbed it, though the rain had slowed by then. The next morning, I walked over to the trailer park's tiny laundromat/coffee stand. Missy, who runs the place, was pouring stale Folgers into her thermos and cussing at the busted dryer again. I asked her if anyone else had seen anything strange the night before. Her face turned pale before the words even left her mouth. "Was it a woman?" she asked, setting her cup down. "Soaking wet?" Asked about Elkins Bay. I nodded. She looked toward the window, then back at me. Jesus. That's the third time this year. Turns out the story's older than most of. U.S. here. Elkins Bay used to be about 15 miles southwest, tucked behind what's now Lake Darnell. Back in the 80s, the government dammed the Navasota River to create the lake, said it would help with irrigation and offer a little hydroelectric boost to the county. But they didn't just dam the river, they drowned everything. Elkins Bay was one of the towns that didn't make it. Most people left. The government offered payouts, relocation deals, the works. But some families stayed too long, thought they could wait it out, or just didn't believe it had happened. And when the floodgates opened, the water came fast. Stories go that 7 people didn't get out. 3 of them were children. One was a young woman, maybe 22 or 23. Lived with her grandmother on the edge of town near the old post office. They never found her body. Not even a piece of clothing. Just her grandma's trailer smashed against a telephone pole like a soda can. Folks figured the current took her downstream, maybe caught her in the undertow or buried her beneath silt and roots. No funeral, no grave. Just her name on a memorial plaque that sits half forgotten near the boat dock at Lake Darnell. After that morning, I started looking into it more. Went to the county records office, dug through newspaper archives. Her name was Lila Ray Hammond. I found a grainy photo of her in a church newsletter, same blue nightgown, same dark hair, same hollow eyes. That photo haunted me more than I'd like to admit. She didn't look angry, just lost. I talked to a few of the old-timers in town. One of them, Cal Reynolds, used to be a diver with the sheriff's department back when the flooding happened. He remembered going down there after someone swore they saw a light moving underwater near where the old church used to be. He told me the deeper he went, the stranger it got. Said the water got cold like ice, even in July. Said the silt started to swirl on its own, like something was breathing down there. He surfaced after only 5 minutes, shaking like a leaf and refusing to go back in. He's the one who told me. The scariest part. She don't knock on just anyone's door, he said. Only folks who've been near the water. Near where Elkins Bay used to be. Like she's sniffing out who can still hear the town. That chilled me to the bone, because 3 weeks before she came to my trailer, I'd gone fishing near the edge of Lake Darnell. I'd wandered off the main trail, looking for a quiet spot. Found this weird little inlet choked with reeds and frogs louder than hell. Caught nothing that day, But I swear at one point I heard what sounded like church bells, soft, like from under the water. Since that night, I've seen her twice more. Once, standing by the propane tank behind Missy's shop, dripping wet though. The sky was clear. Another time, in the rearview mirror while driving past the turnoff to Lake Darnell, just standing on the shoulder, barefoot, eyes blank. She doesn't say anything now, doesn't need to. It's like once you've answered her knock, she knows you. I started dreaming about water, thick, dark water. Dreams where I'm standing waist deep in it and I can feel something brushing past my legs, something searching. I wake up soaked in sweat, the sound of knocking still echoing in my ears. Others have had it worse. Missy stopped showing up at the laundromat. Cal hasn't been seen in over a month. A kid named Brad from Lot 7 was found 2 weeks ago down by the lake, mouth open, lungs full of water. The weird thing? It hadn't rained in days. They said he must have drowned, but how does a kid drown in a dry spell? The county refuses to dredge that part of the lake, says it's too unstable. But I think they know. I think someone up in those shiny offices remembers Elkins Bay, remembers what got buried down there. The last time I saw her was 2 nights ago. A storm rolled through around midnight, and I was sitting on the couch, shotgun in my lap, Jasper, whimpering under the recliner like always. There was no knock this time. Just the wind, the rain, and the soft sound of bare feet moving through mud. When I dared to look outside, she was standing at the end of the lane. Same soaked gown. Same blank eyes, but this time she smiled. And she pointed not at me, but down the road, toward the lake. I haven't slept since. They say you can't drown in a dream. But I'm starting to wonder if that's true. Because each night, the water gets higher. And each night, I get closer to the edge of something I can't come back from. If she knocks again, I don't know if I'll answer. But I'm not sure it matters anymore, because she always finds her way home, even if home is 40 feet beneath the water. It started with a cardboard box shipped from a dying estate sale in Nacogdoches. No return label, no invoice, just a plain brown package that smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten closets. Michael Larrabee had been a vintage cartographer for years, part-time obsession, full-time escape. He cataloged, cleaned, and restored old maps from across the country, specializing in pre-1900 Texas township charts. The box was heavy with rolled parchment and stiff manila folders, but nestled between layers of dusty tracing sheets was something stranger than he'd ever seen. A folded linen-backed map labeled in precise ink as Eastern Shelby County. 1872. Surveyor, M.H. Cross. Except there was no Selby Cross in Shelby County. Never had been. Michael stared at the small circled town name near the bottom edge of the parchment, nestled between 2 rivers that didn't exist on modern geography. The lines were oddly fresh for a map supposedly dated to Reconstruction era. Texas fine and black like ink laid just yesterday, the town grid drawn in tight geometry, narrow roads crisscrossing a 5-block square. He double-checked his Texas Gazetteer. Nothing. Online searches returned 0 references, even in historical digests. No Selby Cross ever incorporated, burned down, or got swallowed by a reservoir. Still, the map had the right smell: brittle paper, a faint hint of iron gall ink, the waxy fade of oil lamp residue. He left it on the dining table that night, a glass of wine sweating beside it, while the cicadas outside hummed like they were winding down some ancient chant. He didn't notice the first change until morning. The town had redrawn itself. At first he thought he was mistaken, or misremembering. Maybe the buildings had always been that shape. But no, the long narrow rectangle labeled post had been a square the night before. A road that was barely sketched in before now forked clearly, and a new building had appeared on the southern edge. It was marked only with a red dot. Not ink, something else. Rust-colored, smeared, almost like a fingerprint. He stepped away from the table like it had hissed at him. Michael wasn't prone to superstition. He restored old paper, not ghost stories. But the shift in that map felt deliberate, not like a misprint or a long faded layer finally blooming from chemical exposure. This was new, fresh, a live dot over the next week. Selby Cross kept redrawing itself. Each morning, the layout grew more complex, new homes etched in neat blocks, a courthouse appearing, a school. Then came the names. Tiny handwriting, barely legible, began to appear over buildings. Granger, Phelps, Wainwright. Inky scribbles like someone was keeping a census after bedtime. Michael even saw the shape of a rail line emerge, stretching west before bending away and vanishing at the edge of the parchment. He stopped cataloging other maps. He stopped sleeping much. He couldn't bring himself to roll the sheet up. Every time he turned away from it, he got the feeling that it was changing behind his back. He tried photographing it, but the images came out blank. He uploaded one to his laptop, just a gray smear, not even lines. Like the map didn't want to be. Digitized. One night, he left the dining room light on and placed an old security webcam on a shelf to face the map. He wanted to see it change. Wanted proof. In the morning, the footage was corrupted. All of it. 30 seconds of static, then darkness. But in the center of the map, where the old town square had been, there was a new marking, a small circle, filled with that same dark red stain. This time, a name had been written beneath it, Michael Larrabee. He felt the air leave the room. He turned slowly, expecting something, someone, but he was alone. The cicadas outside had gone dead quiet. Not even the sound of a passing car disturbed the silence. He didn't sleep that night. Over the following days, Michael tried everything to destroy the map. First, he rolled it and shoved it into the fireplace. It didn't catch. The flames licked around it like it was coated in ice. He poured lighter fluid, used a blowtorch, nothing. Not a single corner of the parchment even curled. He tried soaking it in bleach. The liquid bubbled, hissed, and turned dark red like wine, but the map stayed intact. He locked it in a metal box. Buried it in the woods a mile outside of town. In the middle of the night, he woke to find it lying on his kitchen table, damp with dew, a smear of muddy soil across its surface. The town was growing. More streets. More homes. A long stretch of cemetery had appeared on the outskirts, rows of tiny rectangles marked with hand-scrawled names. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all of them first names only. All of them names he recognized from his life. Aunts, uncles, old classmates, professors, even his ex-wife. Even his childhood dog. And then there was the blood. It wasn't metaphorical. Every night, the map dripped at tiny spots welling up in places, especially near that central dot where his own name sat. The stains spread like mold, soaking into the parchment. One morning, he found fingerprints on his bathroom mirror in the same red. He hadn't touched it. That night, something knocked on his door. Not the sharp, friendly kind. A slow, deliberate knock. Once, then again, then nothing. He stood in the hallway with the lights off, holding a kitchen knife. He could see a shape through the frosted window, small, hunched, unmoving. He didn't open it. He stood there until sunrise. The map was different again. A road had been drawn from the edge of Selby Cross directly to his home street. No name, no lines. Just a thick black trail that cut through every other township like rot. The trees along his neighborhood had started leaning in ways he couldn't explain. The birds didn't sing anymore. Even the bugs had stopped. He tried mailing it to someone else, a historian friend in Austin. Overnight shipping. But the package came back, sitting in his mailbox the next morning. No postage. No seal. Just the map, unfolded and slightly damp, staring up at him like it was laughing. Michael didn't leave his house for days after that. The neighbors came knocking eventually. Police too. He ignored them. The blood had started appearing on his walls. Just a drip here, a streak there. Always the same direction. Downward. Toward the map. Toward that red-stained town square where his name was still written, now etched deeper, almost carved into the parchment like it had been scratched with fingernails. The last night anyone saw Michael Larrabee. A storm rolled through Shelby County. Trees cracked. Power lines went down. Sirens wailed in the distance, then died. And when the wind stopped howling and the sun came up, Michael was gone, but the map remained. It was found in his home, perfectly preserved on the dining table. Only now, the red stain covered the entire center of town. The cemetery had doubled in size, and the new buildings bore new names. One of them was yours, and now it's redrawing itself again. You can hear the scratch of ink if the room is quiet enough. You can smell the mildew and something older, something sour, like wet pennies or rotting leaves. Don't turn away from it. Don't blink. Don't try to fold it up. Because Selby Cross doesn't need roads anymore. It already knows the way. It started with the sound of drums. Not loud, not raucous like the 4th of July parade or the annual Briar Fork Jubilee. These drums were low, like a heartbeat, steady and deep, thudding just enough to make you stop what you were doing and glance out the window. That's what Harold Flanders did. First looked up from his eggs and bacon and said to no one in particular, "That ain't right." He lived alone, had for years, and nobody was there to answer him. But he stood up, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and went to the screen door, squinting through the early morning mist. Across the street, Mrs. Langtry's wind chimes jingled. Once, then fell silent, like even the breeze held its breath. And then came the figures. They weren't dressed for summer, not in Briar Fork, not in July, not in this heat. No, they were wearing black, heavy, formal clothes, the kind you'd see at a winter funeral. Long coats buttoned to the neck, skirts sweeping the cracked pavement, gloves on every hand. And every single one of them had their head tilted just slightly down, not enough to be looking at the ground, but enough to see the whites of their eyes peeking from beneath their brows. Wide open, unblinking. Harold stared, the screen door creaking as he pushed it open. "Hey there," he called, his voice shaking even though he couldn't have said why. "Y'all all right?" Nobody answered. They just marched, one behind the other, in rows 2 or 3 wide, like some silent, solemn procession, like mourners. He counted maybe 50, 60 people. Then more came around the corner from Green Street. By the time the last ones passed the diner down the block, the line had to be 200 strong. They didn't make a sound. Not their shoes on the pavement, not their breath. And as they passed each house, more people stepped out to watch. A woman across the street dropped her coffee mug. It shattered against her porch steps, but she didn't seem to notice. She just kept staring at the procession, her lips parted in a strange sort of awe or dread. And then came the smell. Not rot, not death, not exactly. More like mildew, like a place that's been shut too long, damp and breathing in its own sweat. Harold gagged and stepped back, but he couldn't close the door. Not until they were gone. The parade went all the way down Main Street, past the hardware store, the old fire station, the elementary school that had closed in '98. They didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. And the last of them, a little girl, no older than 7, with a head full of tangled blonde curls and eyes too big for her face, turned and looked right at Harold, before disappearing around the corner. That's when the drums stopped, and the silence that followed. was somehow worse. The sun had barely risen when the sky went dark. Clouds moved in fast, thick and gray and angry. The air grew heavy, the way it does before a storm, but thicker, like trying to breathe through wet wool. Radios cut out. Phones lost signal. The power flickered once, then went dead. That happened to everyone, every house, every block. All within minutes of the last figure disappearing. The first wave of water hit at 7:41 a.m., according to the fire chief's report. But none of those reports tell the full story. None of them say what Harold and 50 other townsfolk swore they saw. The flood didn't come from the river. Briar Fork sat just a few miles west of the Brazos, and while it wasn't unheard of to get some seasonal flooding when the rains came, this wasn't like that. There'd been no rain. No warnings, no dam breach. The water came from beneath. It started as a low rumble, like something deep underground was shifting. Then the streets cracked. First a little hairline fractures, then wide, jagged splits that belched black, muddy water like blood from a wound. It surged up through storm drains and manholes, poured from basements, gushed from crawl spaces, and it was cold. Too cold. Harold tried to drive, but his truck's engine died before he could get it off the curb. He said it was like the water killed the battery, like it sucked the electricity out of the metal itself. He ran instead, climbed the old radio tower on Ridge Road and watched the water rise. Watched it swallow Briar Fork inch by inch. Watched houses buckle and rooftops collapse. But he never saw the marchers again. In the days that followed, search and rescue teams combed the area. They expected to find bodies, debris, anything. But the strange thing, what every report quietly avoided, was that no bodies were ever found. Not a single confirmed death, no survivors either. Everyone was simply gone. Except Harold. And Harold never talked much after that. He moved to a trailer park outside of San Angelo and spent most of his time staring at nothing. Folks said he went weird, talked in his sleep, started every morning standing by his door, like he was waiting for something to pass by. 2 months after the flood, a group of urban explorers found a shoe. Just one, in the middle of the drained lake bed that used to be Briar Fork. It was a black leather dress shoe, the kind you'd wear to a funeral. Tied inside was a note, soaked and nearly unreadable, but they managed to make out one sentence. They knew the water was coming. The government blamed a freak aquifer collapse. Geologists scratched their heads, said it didn't make sense. No one's ever built there again, but some nights, especially the damp ones, truckers who take the back highway say they see something strange near the old turnoff where Main Street used to be. A procession, faint and slow-moving. Black clothes, heads down, eyes wide open. And if you roll down your window, you just might hear the drums. They were digging the new drainage lines out by the remnants of old Glenmare when they hit the schoolhouse. Just a few brick corners still standing and some waterlogged desks half buried in the earth like bones. The county surveyor said the school wasn't on any modern records, which wasn't surprising. Glenmare was one of those Texas towns that vanished in the 1960s when the lake expansions came. Most folks moved uphill and forgot it, or pretended to. What was odd wasn't the building. It was the register. It floated up from the muck like it had just been set there, leather-wrapped, blackened around the edges, but dry inside. Still legible. It made its way to the Historical Society in Fort Wells, where Mrs. Teresa Eddings, retired librarian and full-time town archivist, found herself. Flipping through brittle pages smelling like iron and mildew, she saw the usual names. Boys and girls with last names she recognized from the graveyard stones outside of town. And then she saw his. Matthew K. Loring. 3rd grade, age 9, date of enrollment, August 17, 1953, date of exit, blank. That wasn't what disturbed her. What disturbed her was she'd seen the same name last year in a ledger recovered from Elbridge. Hollow, another sunken town west of Waco, and before that, she swore she'd seen it in the records salvaged from Hollister Bend, which went under during the 1981 dam failure. Always third grade. Always age 9. She pulled them all out, working late into the night with her lamp flickering in the corner and the crickets chirping louder than usual outside the historical building's windows. Every record said the same. Every town that had drowned under lake water, flood, or acts of God since 1953 listed the same boy. Same name. Same age. No parents listed. No address. Just a clean entry. Matthew K. Loring. And always, the register ended before the school year was completed. Sometimes a few weeks in, sometimes mid-semester. But every town was gone by years. N. She wrote the name down on a sticky note and placed it above her desk. The yellow paper curled under the heat of the lamp. Her cat, Winston, pawed at the windowsill like he saw something outside. Something she couldn't. That night, she dreamed of water dripping steadily onto her bed from the ceiling. It pooled beneath her feet, and when she reached down to touch it, she heard a boy's voice whisper from under the floorboards, "Don't forget me." In the morning, her sticky note was soaked. Her windows were shut. She called a friend at the State Education Board, Margot Childress, a retired administrator who owed her a few favors. Margot ran the name through archived microfilm, district transfers, and even some Social Security leads. Nothing. No birth certificate. No dental records. No parents. No child by that name enrolled anywhere currently. Could be a ghost story, Margot said with a nervous chuckle. Maybe someone pulling your leg over the years. You ever think of that? I've got 5 different ledgers, Margot, Teresa whispered. All handwritten by different teachers in different towns. He's there. Always the same neat, careful print. Always the same date. Margot didn't call back after that. The next week, another register surfaced, this time from what was left of Jenner's Crossing. Teresa didn't even open it. She flipped to the student log and turned pages until she saw it. There. Line 17. Matthew K. Loring. 3rd grade. Age 9. This time, someone had added a note in red inks. Sat alone. Didn't eat. Smiled when it rained. She began noticing things. Water damage on books that hadn't been touched. That smell of flooded basement following her like perfume. Her cat wouldn't enter her office anymore. Her email history reset itself each night. Then came the day the envelope arrived. No return. Address. Just her name written in pencil. Inside was a photo. A class picture. 22 children in front of a schoolhouse, faded blue uniforms, and one boy in the center staring directly at the camera. All the others looked off to the side, or blinked or fidgeted, but he was still. Straight dark hair. Pale eyes. No one else in the photo was labeled. Just a note on the back. Glenmare Elementary -1953 MKL. Teresa tried showing it to her colleague in the records department. He laughed at first, then stopped. "He looks familiar," he said. "Did he used to come here?" "No," she whispered. "He never left." That night, Teresa began reading old newspapers. She went through drowned towns alphabetically. Searched for every town in Texas since 1953 that had gone under. She found 15. 12 of them had confirmed school records listing a Matthew K. Loring. The others, she guessed, just hadn't been found yet. Then something even stranger happened. She found a mention in a 1954 San Antonio Gazette about a boy named Matthew Loring. The article said a body was recovered from a flooded school in Delray Falls after a sudden dam burst. The corpse had no identification but was buried under that. Name. There was a photo. The same face, same pale eyes. The reporter said he had an odd grin even in death. She took a leave from the Historical Society. Her dreams weren't dreams anymore. She'd wake up gasping with water in her throat. She'd hear giggling in the walls. Once, the power flickered and her screen displayed nothing but the name over and over typed in long rows. One evening, a little girl from the neighborhood knocked on her door. Said her mom was in the backyard, calling for help, but Teresa had no neighbors with kids. When she followed the girl, barefoot into the dewy grass, she saw a shape behind her shed. A boy, wearing a 1950s school uniform, holding a folded umbrella. "Did you forget me?" he asked, voice small. When she tried to run, the ground squished under her feet. Water rose where there had been none. She slipped. She saw small hands, pulling at her ankles. She didn't remember how she got back inside. But her front door was locked. And her phone was wet. And the class photo had moved. Now it was on her pillow. That night, Fort Wells got 6 inches of rain in an hour. The street outside her window overflowed. They said it was a fluke, a flash flood. 2 houses collapsed. The next day, volunteers found a ruined school book floating in the runoff. 3rd grade. Name on the inside cover, Matthew K. Loring. And now, there's a new boy registered at Prairie Edge Elementary where they've been building up the flood walls. 3rd grade, age 9. He doesn't say much. Sits by the window, watches the clouds. His name is Matthew, but the teacher never asked for his middle initial. She doesn't want to know, because sometimes when the rain starts, she hears his desk creak, and she swears he's humming a song no one taught him. Something old. Something that sounds like water dripping from rotting wood. And he always smiles when the storm begins. The Trinity had always been a fickle thing. Locals said she had a mind of her own, shifting her muddy fingers through the land like an old woman rearranging her trinkets. After the floods in '79, the river curved where it hadn't before, swallowing what used to be part of old Anderson Hollow, mostly just farmland, a few stilt houses, and what was left of a tiny Baptist chapel. By the early '80s, that whole patch of Texas had become just a squiggle on a blue-green map marked unstable floodplain. Nobody talked much about what went under, except the old-timers who remembered cow skulls washing up days later, white and clean and staring. I wasn't from there. I came down from D.C. 2 years ago, working restoration contracts with the Army Corps of Engineers. Mostly hydrology stuff, a lot of sonar mapping and sediment scans. Real boring until it wasn't. We were sent in after some unusually low water. Levels exposed a submerged ridge where the river had pulled back after a drought. The mud baked hard as old concrete, and something caught the light under the crust glass. Not bottles or trash, but window glass, tall and vertical like the side of a building, not shattered, not warped, impossibly intact. We flagged it for survey and sent 2 divers, Suarez and Kyle, to assess whether it was man-made structure or some geological freak. They weren't down more than 20 minutes. Came back slow, quiet, faces pale behind there. Neoprene hoods. I thought maybe they'd hit a pocket of bad gas or panicked, but both refused to talk in front of each other. They gave their reports separately, both vague as hell. Said they saw an upright frame, maybe a house front, though it couldn't be, not down here. Said the glass wasn't just clean, it looked fresh, like it had been cleaned from the inside. That night, Suarez knocked on my camper door around 2:30 a.m., shaking. He had his wetsuit half on, half off, like he geared up in a panic. He kept saying he needed to go back down. "I saw someone in there," he whispered, eyes wild. "A girl in the glass." She blinked at me. It wasn't a reflection. I Tried calming him down, told him stress can do things underwater. Light plays tricks, silt clouds twist around like ghosts if you're not careful. He just kept repeating, she blinked. Then he left. I didn't follow. He went back down alone sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. No one found him until 3 days later, washed up on a sandbar 20 miles downriver. His mask was gone, tank half full. Neck bruised like someone had gripped him there. Cores called it misadventure. Kyle quit the same week. They reassigned me temporarily, but I came back on my own time. Not for Suarez. For the glass. I wanted to see it for myself. It took some bribing and calling in favors. But I got access to the coordinates, along with a basic dive suit and permission to do civilian exploratory work on a private weekend. No official capacity. No backup. The descent was colder than I expected. Visibility wasn't terrible. I passed a few collapsed beams, maybe old piers or bridge supports. Then the mud sloped into what looked like a drowned ravine, narrow and steep. And there it was. A wall of glass, or more accurately, a face of glass. Panes stacked side by side like a showroom, partially sunken into the clay shelf, framed in old iron, maybe 8 feet tall, 20 across. No house or structure around it. Just this window wall standing like a forgotten altar to something no one prayed to anymore. I swam closer, light bouncing off the surface. I could see my reflection for a moment blurred in the water's movement. Then it vanished. But something was still looking back. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone I'd ever seen. Her face, no. Its face was pale, too perfect, almost doll-like. Eyes large, unmoving. Skin so smooth it didn't ripple with the water. She looked around my age, maybe 35, maybe dead. And then she blinked. I flinched backward, nearly lost my regulator. My heartbeat slammed against the inside of my skull. I turned the light away and looked back. Nothing there now. Just my own horrified face reflecting back at me. I surfaced fast, head ringing. Coughed half the Trinity out of my lungs. I didn't go back in. Not for weeks, but I kept dreaming about the glass. In the dreams, the panes weren't underwater anymore. They were in a hallway, standing upright like mirrors at odd angles. The woman was always behind one of them, her face never quite in the same place. Always one blink behind. The last time I saw her in the dream, she wasn't blinking anymore. She was watching. Eventually, I couldn't ignore it. I went back. Second dive, I brought a GoPro, something small, and mounted on the helmet. I swam slower, scanning the riverbed as I approached. A soft sound pulsed in the water like singing, far away. I brushed it off as sonar echoes. The glass wall had shifted slightly. One pane had fallen. Cracked. Inside the frame was now what looked like a room, like the glass had become a kind of screen, not reflective but viewing something. Elsewhere, there was furniture, a stairwell. The girl, sitting at the top of it, legs crossed, arms resting on her knees. She looked sad. She blinked slowly, like it hurt her to move. Then she stood and walked toward the inside of the glass. I swear to God, her footsteps echoed in the water. Muffled but distinct, I began to rise. The glass rippled. The water felt suddenly warmer, like someone exhaled into it. Then I saw the hand pressed to the other side. Only it didn't stop at the glass. The fingers came through, not like water, not like mist, like real skin pushing into our world. Into my world, I bolted. I dropped the GoPro and kicked up through 10 feet of silt and darkness. Something brushed my leg and I nearly passed out. But I made it to the surface. I never went back after that. The river swallowed the ridge again that spring. Flooded higher than it had in years. A few weeks ago, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name and an SD card. Footage. From the GoPro dot, the clip starts where I was drifting in front of the glass wall. The girl appears. She stares into the lens. She walks to the glass and she whispers something. The mic is distorted, but I played it 100 times. She says, "Let me in," then something else. "You already did." The last frame is my own reflection, except I'm not blinking. The reflection is, when the last of the sun baked the cracked lip of Lake Abbott in late July, no one expected the water to vanish as fast as it did. One week the shoreline was stubborn and low, the next it had receded more than 40 yards, like something had sucked it back underground. Docks hung useless in the air like skeletal arms, boats grounded and tilted like rotting teeth. But what shocked the townsfolk most wasn't the disappearance of the lake. It was what reappeared underneath it. An entire street. They called it Water Street, though that name never showed up on any maps. It ran crooked and sunken through the lake bed like something that had been hastily buried and half forgotten. Brick buildings poked through the muck, leaning at odd angles, some half collapsed, others eerily intact. There were rusted poles with decapitated street signs. Shattered windows. A lamppost bent like it had been twisted at the neck. You couldn't see the whole thing unless you took a boat out to the center of where the lake used to be. Then walked the rest across mud so thick it swallowed your ankles. It was Sheriff Tom Leland who found the bones first. He'd gone out with a pair of surveyors sent by the county. The three of them were poking around a crumbled storefront when Tom spotted a long, thin shape jutting from the dry silt beside a parking meter. At first, he thought it was a tree root, but roots didn't have knuckles. The dirt gave up easy when he clawed at it, and within a few minutes they had a full human skeleton stretched out before them, curled almost fetal-like beside the curb. No clothing, no shoes, nothing but dry bone, darkened with age. Within hours the county cordoned the site. Archaeologists came. Historians. A forensics team from Austin. They found more skeletons, 7 in total, each one hidden at odd spots down Water Street. One behind a mailbox. One crumpled behind the wheel of a rust-eaten Oldsmobile. Another wedged between a pair of long collapsed walls that must have once been a diner. And not one of them matched the death records of Longford County. That part got folks whispering, because Lake Abbott was man-made. Built in '62 to flood a handful of lowland homesteads and connect 2 parched branches of the Brazos. Everyone who'd lived where the water now stood had been bought out and relocated. There were lists, official notices, evacuation records. They'd even moved the cemeteries. That was supposed to be the rule, no one left behind, but there were. No names for these bones. Dr. Erickson from the county medical examiner's office ran the DNA through state databases. No matches. Age estimates were strange too. Some remains looked ancient, predating the lake's construction by decades, even centuries. But they'd been found with fillings in their teeth and metal surgical pins from the 1980s. One man had an artificial hip that didn't hit the market until 1991. Another had the fused vertebrae of a spinal surgery that required equipment less than 20 years old. Yet the silt around them had fossilized, and there were no drag marks, no signs of the bodies being moved. They'd been there for a very long time. Sheriff Tom didn't sleep much that week. Not because of what they found, but because of what he started to remember. Dreams of a little store with peeling red paint. A girl in a yellow dress standing by a payphone that no longer existed. The distant echo of shoes clicking down a long, narrow alley, and he'd never been in that alley before, not even as a child. He started drawing things, layouts, a map. He sketched out a clock shop he'd never seen, labeled it sundown timepieces. A hotel sign. Water Street Lodge, vacancy always. He tried to convince himself it was all an overactive response to the bones, But then he found the key. It was in a drawer at the sheriff's office, tucked beneath a pile of incident reports from 2003. Small brass, worn down. Stamped on the flat top were the numbers 317. He didn't remember putting it there. No one else admitted to it. But it fit perfectly into a lock he found when he went back to the half-sunken hotel on Water Street. The one with shattered windows. And a front desk covered in thick moss. Behind the desk were cubbyholes for room keys. Only one slot had a door. Room 317. When he turned the key, something behind that door moved. Not much. Just the soft creak of something shifting, like a chair. Sliding back. He never opened it. Sighed he didn't have to. Because whatever was back there started whispering. His name in a voice that sounded like his father's, but Tom's father had died in '97. Long before the lake ever dried. They say Tom started drinking again after that. Showed up to work. Red-eyed and quiet. Wouldn't go near the water line. Said the lake was breathing again. That it had coughed something up it couldn't swallow back. On his last day as sheriff, he came into the station early and handed over his badge with shaking hands. He didn't say goodbye. Just walked out to the lake bed and disappeared into the fog. That clung there that morning like old breath. They found his boots a day later, propped neatly beside the skeleton at the curb. Locals started avoiding Water Street altogether. Reporters stopped coming after the official story labeled the bones undocumented burial remains from a forgotten rural community. But no one really bought that, because the dream started spreading. People around Lake Abbott, folks who'd never walked that street, began to talk in their sleep. Children described buildings in eerie detail. A 7-year-old boy drew a blueprint of a barbershop right down to the placement of a cracked mirror and the initials RD on the chair arm. His parents had no idea where he got it from. Then, the shadows started, not real ones, reflections. People walking their dogs past the dried lake bed said they saw figures moving in the water's ghost glass surface. A woman standing in the wreck of the diner swore she caught her own reflection, blinking after she'd turned away. And a surveyor from Dallas quit mid-job after he saw someone in his drone footage waving from a rooftop that had already collapsed. That was before the street got wet again. It wasn't rain. No forecast, no clouds. But one morning in August, the sheriff's replacement drove out to inspect a report of vandalism and found a thin stream of water trickling down the old curb. By noon, the whole street was slick. Not flooded, just wet, like the ground itself was sweating. Mud seeped through the cracks in the pavement. The bones began to sink again. One by one, the skeletons they'd unearthed were pulled back into the lake bed, as though something below had remembered it left them behind. They tried to dig one of them up again. Just one, but where there had been dry earth and bone, there was only stone-hard silt, the kind that takes centuries to form. They'd brought in equipment, tried to cut through. The drills overheated. The ground sparked. One of the crew said he heard whispering through the steel. When he pressed his ear to it, they called off the site for good after that. Now Water Street isn't on the news. It's not on the signs or the brochures, not even on Google Earth anymore. The images have been blurred, labeled image unavailable. But if you drive down Route 12 in mid-September, just past the old gas station with the broken clock, and you roll your window down, you might catch the scent of wet brick and something that smells faintly like mothballs and lake rot. And if you stop, if you get out and walk just a little toward where the fog always gathers low, you might hear the faint slap of footsteps behind you. But don't turn around, because what lives down there never left. It just waits, and the bones? They weren't residents. They were replacements. It started with the rain, the kind that doesn't just fall, it presses down, soaking everything so thoroughly it feels like the land itself is trying to wash away. That was the kind of rain I drove into on my way out of San Angelo, headed toward Dallas after dropping off a load of wiring for some mid-rise apartments that would probably go unfinished for another 6 months. The clouds were hanging low and purple, the horizon smeared with the kind of storm glow you only get in West Texas when it's about to turn nasty. The radio lost its signal somewhere past Bollinger, and my phone GPS was flickering like it was. Confused about where I even was, I pulled over near a crummy roadside rest stop, one of those older ones with busted vending machines and a rotting picnic table, half swallowed by weeds and lit a smoke while trying to recalibrate the signal. When I saw the sign dot, it looked old, like one of those hand-painted tourist traps you'd pass back in the 60s. Faded blue, the lettering almost flaked away, just barely legible in the rain-spattered haze of my windshield. Welcome to Eden's Rest, a place you'll never want to leave. I remember blinking at it, half laughing, because it wasn't there the last time I took this route. No joke, I drove this stretch twice a month. Always stopped at the same rusted bathroom shack because my bladder was getting too old for long stretches. That sign? Brand new to me. And then I saw the footprints. At first, I thought they were just puddle splashes. But when I got closer, because curiosity is a disease with no cure, I saw that they were actual prints. Barefoot, oddly long, sunk into the soft shoulder of the road like someone had been pacing in place. Not just one set either. 3 or 4, maybe more, all fresh. The mud hadn't filled in yet, and it was still raining. Whoever made them had to be nearby. I called out once, felt stupid, called again anyway. Nothing. Just wind and that insistent patter of rain on hood and leaves. I should have gotten in my truck, turned around, and ignored it. But the thing about long-haul driving is that it messes with your brain. Long hours, no company, and just enough weird corners of the internet to make you believe every conspiracy could be true if you catch it at the right angle. So I followed the prints. They led behind the rest stop, past the crumbling picnic bench, into a grove of trees that shouldn't have been there, because I swore there was just scrubland last time. But sure enough, there they were. Mesquite, oak, and something else mixed in that I couldn't name, all bent low like they were watching me. The path dipped into a shallow hollow, and that's when I saw it. The road, not a highway, not a dirt trail. A real road blacktop, cracked and veined like skin, lined with those faded white stripes that never glowed anymore. It led off into the June trees, sloping down like it had been there forever, like the land had forgotten to erase it. I should have turned back. Every nerve in my body told me so, but something was wrong. I wasn't just curious, I felt drawn. Not hypnotized, not drugged. Nothing like that. Just like it would be rude to ignore it. Like it would notice if I walked away. So I stepped onto it. Instantly, the rain slowed. Not stopped, just dulled, muted, like sound itself got caught between the trees and couldn't make it out. I checked my phone again. No service. GPS blinking, like it was underground, but the footprints were still there. Damp toes pressed into the gravel, spaced like a careful walk ahead of me. So I followed. The first thing I saw was the gas station. Old school. Late 50s maybe, but cleaner than it had any right to be. Red trim, white siding, a hand-painted sign that just read filling station like it didn't need to be more. Specific, no brand, no prices, just a single pump and a glass door with one of those bells you only hear in movies. I walked up, peered through the fogged window, and froze. There was a man behind the counter. Gray overalls, heavy glasses. He didn't blink. He didn't even breathe. Just stared straight ahead, like he was expecting someone. I knocked. He didn't flinch, not once. I was about to walk away when the bell jingled by itself and the door swung open. I know how that sounds. I do. But I hadn't touched it. No wind, no trick. It just opened. And suddenly the man turned, just his head, just enough to look at me and say, "You're late." Then nothing. I asked what town this was. He just said it again, "You're late," and that was it. He didn't move, didn't blink. I backed away. That's when I noticed the other buildings. They weren't there before, I swear on everything, but they were now. A barber shop, a diner, a small post office with a rusted mailbox. All lit from within, all inhabited. I walked toward the diner. My boots sank into gravel that seemed too soft, like I was walking on memory foam. The windows were misted, but I could see people inside, sitting, eating, staring straight ahead like mannequins at a department store display. I opened the door. Every head turned at once. No one spoke. Just watched me. A waitress stepped out from the back and walked to me, her smile crooked in a way that didn't seem born of muscles, but of something trying to imitate them. She held a coffee pot that steamed too much. Poured me a cup I didn't ask. "For," whispered, "he's been waiting for you," and then smiled again. Wider this time. Too wide. I left without drinking it. Stepped back into the street that had gotten longer while I was inside. The thing is, there were no signs leading to Eden's Rest. There was no exit on the map. But the deeper I went, the more the town built itself. A church bell started ringing. Somewhere I couldn't see. A child laughed from an alleyway that hadn't existed 2 minutes before. Shadows stretched the wrong way toward the light, not away from it. I tried to turn back. The road was gone, not disappeared, not magically. Vanished, just shifted. Trees had closed in. The blacktop had cracked into something older, worn, cobbled, like it had been built by hand. I ran, no shame in admitting it. I ran hard, back toward where I thought the highway should have been. But Eden's Rest had no back, no exit, just more town, more houses, more lights. A theater marquee flickering, with the word "repeat" over and over. And the worst part? People were starting to notice me. They came out from the houses. Not fast, just quiet, watching, smiling that same wrong smile. They didn't chase. They didn't talk. They just watched. Like they knew I would tire myself out eventually. Like they'd seen this play out before. And I believe now they had. I found the sign again, the same one. "Welcome to Eden's Rest." But this time it was upright, lit by a flickering bulb from a street lamp that hadn't been there earlier. And written beneath the welcome was a new line, etched fresh. "You made it. No roads lead back." The footprints were gone. I tried using my phone again. Nothing. Tried walking in one direction for hours. Every path led back to Main Street. I even carved an X into a tree, only to find it marked on every other tree I passed, like they were all watching too. That was 3 days ago. Maybe more. I don't know anymore. The sun rises, but it doesn't move. It's like a light bulb behind. A curtain. People are friendly, sure. They wave now. Say hello. Ask how I'm settling in. But I know what this place is. It's not a town. It's a trap. A loop. A place built on forgetting. Where every face looks like someone you knew once but wrong. Off. Like they borrowed the skin but didn't know how to wear it right. Some of them don't even blink. I think I'm forgetting my own name. I write this down because maybe someone will find it. Maybe someone will see that damn sign and think twice. Maybe they'll know better than to follow footprints into a town. That builds itself behind you, erasing every way out. If you're reading this, turn around. Don't stop for the rain. Don't follow curiosity, and whatever you do, don't go looking for Eden's Rest, because no roads lead back. Only in. She never should have taken the trail past Sundown Rock, but she did. That summer, the rains hadn't just come, they'd stayed. Day after day of water pressing down on the hills like a weight until the soil turned soft and the trees seemed to weep alongside the sky. When the dam finally cracked, it wasn't some grand biblical spectacle. It was quiet. A pop, a groan. And then, like an exhale, the water slid free and swallowed what was left of Camden Hollow. They didn't find many bodies. Some debris, a baby shoe, a rocking chair tangled in barbed wire, but no one who lived down in the hollow was ever seen again. The dam was declared unsafe, the land off limits. But fences don't stop hikers, not in Texas, not when the wild calls and the earth opens its quiet mouth. Nora was only looking for wildflowers. She'd taken the detour around the warning sign more out of spite than curiosity. The park ranger had treated her like she was stupid, warning her about loose shale and unstable ground. She'd smiled, nodded, and ignored him. The moment he turned his back, the trail narrowed as it climbed higher. The trees grew sparse, wind whipped and bowed as if something above had frightened them into a permanent lean. She made it to a ridge where the sun cracked through the clouds and lit up the valley below. There was no town, just thick moss and broken timber that used to be rooftops poking out of the grass like tombstones. Water still shimmered in long, narrow pockets like veins. It looked peaceful, even pretty. Then the ground under her boots shifted. Just a fraction, an almost imperceptible sigh, and she froze. Her ears perked, the way they had since she was a child hiding from storms in her closet. At first, all she heard was her own heartbeat, fat and loud. But then it came again. A cry. It wasn't an animal. Animals scream. They howl. They yelp. This was different. This sounded human. Female, soft and desperate. Like someone trying not to be heard and failing. Nora turned slowly. The trail was empty. The hill was empty. And beneath her, the ground rose again. Just slightly. Like a lung inhaling under wet, heavy blankets. She whispered, "Hello?" The sobbing stopped. For a few seconds, she thought she'd imagined it, that it was just the sound of wind through broken branches. But then she felt the vibration, not in the air, in her feet. A long, low hum like something humming beneath the surface. Then a crack echoed behind her. Not a twig, something larger. Stone? Cement? She stepped backward toward the ridge, and the cry came again. Louder now, closer, wet and gurgling, as if coming up through mud. She ran. The trail blurred. Thorns scraped her calves. She didn't look down, didn't dare. The trees swayed, and the wind hissed her name, or she imagined it did. She didn't stop until she saw the fence again, rusted and barely standing, bent like something had leaned on it too long. Back at the station, she said nothing. The ranger gave her a look but didn't ask. What would she have told him? That the ground was alive? That something mourned beneath it? But she came back the next day. And the next. Each time, she got a little closer. Not to the town itself, it was gone, erased, but to the place where the dam had broken. Where the crack in the earth still gaped like a wound that wouldn't heal. That's where the sobbing was clearest, not constant. It came and went like a tide. Some days it was faint, like someone buried deep. Other days it rose like a wail, like someone clawing at the floor of the world. She stopped telling her friends where she was hiking, stopped answering texts. Her dreams filled with images she couldn't shake, bloated faces pressed against glass, hands pawing at a ceiling of dirt, open mouths that never drew breath. Then one day she brought a shovel. It was stupid. It was madness. But she couldn't ignore the sound anymore. She dug until her hands blistered, until the red clay turned dark and slick and smelled like something old and wrong. She dug until she hit something hard. Wood. She thought it might Be part of a house, a beam, a splintered rafter, but it was smooth, painted, blue. She dug around the edge. It was a door. She touched it, and the crying stopped. Then a knock. 3 soft taps from the other side. Her whole body locked up. The dirt around her feet shifted. The air grew humid, thick like breath. Something touched her ankle, not hard light, like a finger tracing skin. She scrambled back, slipped, landed hard. The door cracked out from the split. A single eye stared. Up at her. It didn't blink. It was bloodshot. The iris pale gray, the pupil wide and wrong. A child's eye. Then it moved, fast. The crack widened as the door was pushed open, not up, but sideways, deeper into the soil, as if gravity didn't apply. From the gap came a smell of river rot and skin. A hand slid out, small, pale, wrinkled like it had been soaking too long. Fingernails torn and bleeding. Nora screamed. She ran again, didn't stop until her car door slammed and her tires spun. Gravel. She didn't go back for days. But the sound followed her, not just the crying whispers now. Her name over and over. In the shower drain, in the engine hum, in the groan of floorboards. Nora, Nora. She started sleeping in the living room with the lights on. Then one night, she woke to a wet spot on the floor. She followed it, half dreaming, to the front door. There, on the porch, were muddy footprints, child-sized, leading toward the woods. She didn't sleep after that. They found her car at the trailhead 2 weeks later. Engine cold, keys still in the ignition. Inside her pack, folded neatly, was a child's blue sweater. Stained dark, wet. They searched the hills. Dogs barked at the ridge and refused to go near it. One bolted and was found later, curled in a ditch, shaking uncontrollably. The official story was presumed dead. The dam had cracked again. The rain had returned. Nobody wanted to talk about Camden Hollow. Not anymore. But hikers still go missing. And every so often, someone walking near Sundown Rock says the ground moves under their feet. And if you're very still, very quiet, you can hear it too. A sobbing, breathless sound, and a child's voice whispering your name. I first heard it just north of Mathis, somewhere around mile marker 72. The hum on my CB radio, low and persistent, cut through the normal trucker chatter like static from another era. I'd been driving I-37 for years, knew every bump and pothole from Corpus Christi to San Antonio, and I'd heard all kinds of junk bounce through the radio waves. Drunken banter, broken Spanish, religious rants from loners talking into empty channels. But this was different. This had polish, clarity, like an old-fashioned AM broadcast you'd pick up in the middle of nowhere during the witching hour. When stations you've never heard of slip in through the noise. At first, I figured it was a rebroadcast, some weirdo with a transmitter recycling old news for nostalgia. But the voice, smooth, male, mid-40s by my guest, started reading local headlines. Headlines I didn't recognize. Dry river swells again near Red Harvest Bridge. Flood warnings extended through Tillman County. Red Harvest Bridge, Tillman County. I pulled over at a rest stop near Campbellton, shut off the rig, and cranked the volume. Next came the weather. Highs today in the low 90s, muggy with storms rolling in from the south. Expect sheet lightning over the glade by nightfall. Stay indoors after dusk. His voice dipped, barely a whisper. Best not to be seen by her again. That part? That wasn't weather. That was something else entirely. It ended with obituaries. Real folksy stuff. We bid farewell to Clement Harker, age 82, passed peacefully in his chair on Moss Street, July 3rd, surrounded by 3 faithful hounds and his cousin Mary Ann. Services to be held at Calvary Church on Blake Road. Bring your own chairs. There was static, and then a faint, barely audible hymn. Shall we gather at the river? I let the radio run for almost an hour listening. The same guy came back on the air about every 20 minutes. Never a station ID, never a call sign. Just weather, news, and death. It creeped me out in a way I hadn't felt since I was a boy listening to tornado warnings in the dark. Over the next few days, other drivers started talking. I heard one guy up near Pleasanton claim he heard a broadcast mention his own name in the obits. Dennis Ray Carter, 54, left us unexpectedly Tuesday afternoon. A man of few words and a loyal patron of the Sawmill Diner. Survived by his dog Max and the empty booth at the back window. He was still breathing when he heard it. Died of a heart attack 2 days later. Max went missing the same night. Another fella out of Alice said he was fiddling with his radio during a long night run and caught a cooking segment. That's right, a cooking segment. Real casual, like something from the 1970s. Today we're making spider stew. A family favorite. Since the Stillwell famine, you'll need 8 legs per serving, garlic powder, and a good tight lid. The guy thought it was a prank until he swore he saw a shape crawling alongside his trailer on the 281 interchange that night. Not walking, not running, crawling. I told myself it was just atmosphere, just weird Texas air and bored truckers making ghost stories out of static. I told myself that right up until I caught a segment that mentioned me. Not my full name, but my handle. We'd like to remind all northbound travelers, especially those answering to gravel boots, to avoid. Mile marker 63 this week. The soil's still soft and the fog rolls in early. We wouldn't want to lose another. Another what? That was enough to keep me off that stretch for a while, but I couldn't shake it. Couldn't stop tuning in, late at night, just to see if it came back. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it was just dead air or regular traffic. But when it did, it always came in the same, crystal clear, like the voice was sitting right beside me. One night, I picked it up again near George West. The broadcast opened with breaking news. Boys found a new hole in the center of town. Didn't dig it. Didn't plan for it. Just opened up one morning. Folks say it smells like the day they pulled Mr. Crosswell from the well back in '59. Sour and old. It's not the first one either. They're spreading. Best steer clear of the square until after dusk. The sound of children laughing trickled in behind the voice, high-pitched, unhurried. Like kids playing with something they didn't understand. Town they spoke of was never named, not once. But the landmarks kept piling up. Moss Street, Blight Road, Stillwell Park, the Glade. It started forming a picture in my head, like I was building a map one word at a time. I marked what I could on a Texas atlas, but none of it matched up. Every road dead-ended or turned into gravel. Every. County mention didn't exist anymore. If it ever had. It was early October when I heard the line that broke me. Tonight's community notice. Lights have been seen again near the silo. If you see them, turn off all radios and do not respond to the knocking. They aren't asking for help anymore. That's what the voice said. I was parked just outside of Three Rivers. I turned off my rig. I turned off the CB. I listened. Nothing. Then came the knock. On the cab window. 3 slow raps, deliberate. I thought it was a trooper. I thought maybe I'd parked too close to the off-ramp. I rolled down the window an inch and looked. Nothing was there. No boots on gravel, no flashlight, no cruiser. Just empty shoulder and thick, humid dark. I turned the key and peeled out without checking mirrors. That night, I didn't sleep. I started digging. I asked old-timers. Hit up CB forums. A guy from Seguin swore his uncle used to talk about a town that disappeared during the 1947 floods. Said it was swallowed whole after the river rerouted and no one ever found where it went. Not the bodies. Not the buildings. Nothing. Just a Few personal effects found tangled in barbed wire along a dry creek bed. The town's name? No one could remember. I kept listening. More names started popping up in the obituaries. Familiar ones. Other truckers. Dispatchers. Even towns. One night I heard, "Today we mourn the passing of Maple Run. She lasted 111 years." Before surrendering to fire, silence, and ash, survivors include memories, echoes, and the shape left behind in the dust. I called it in. I reported it to the FCC, thinking maybe someone was playing a dangerous game on restricted airwaves. They didn't laugh. They asked a lot of questions. Then they stopped responding altogether. When I followed up, they said they had no record of any such complaint. It's been 6 months. I'm still on the road. Still driving nights when I can. But I've learned to keep the CB off between 2 and 4 a.m. That's when the station comes. Clearest. That's when the town you hear on dead air speaks loudest. I don't listen anymore, but it doesn't matter, because now it knows my name. And last night, it said I died next Thursday. Alone. Northbound. Somewhere around mile marker 63. Right where the soil's still soft and the fog rolls in early. I believe it. I just don't know if there's anything I can do to stop it. Or if, like the town, I'm already gone. Just a ghost on someone else's frequency. The light fades slow in Braxton Bay. It doesn't just dip behind the hills or fall behind the clouds like it does in other Texas towns. It bleeds, smears itself thin over the water, and then disappears like it's being swallowed. Locals say dusk in Braxton Bay has its own kind of silence too, one that makes the wind hush and the birds shut up just before it happens. No one really talks about what it is, not outright, but everybody knows. You hear stories at the diner, whispered, by old-timers who stare out the window too long or hold their coffee a little too tight. But it's the boaters that come in all flustered, wide-eyed and stammering, swearing up and down they saw children playing on the water. On it, not in it. That's how it started for me. I wasn't supposed to be there, not for long anyway. I was chasing a land deal on the other side of the state, and Braxton Bay was just a dot on the route. I needed gas, a coffee, and maybe a place to crash if I didn't feel like pushing the drive. Small town, old gas pumps with faded Texaco labels, and the kind of general store that still sells tackle bait behind the counter. That's where I first heard the name Braxton Bay. The guy behind the counter was called Walt, had a voice like gravel and nicotine. Asked me where I was headed and if I liked to fish. I told him not really, just passing through, and he shrugged like that was a shame. Said the bay had some of the best night crappie fishing you'll ever see if you weren't spooked easily. I asked him what he meant and he just kind of laughed, a dry, tired sound like a porch screen door opening into a storm. You'll see, he said. Or maybe you won't. It's not every night. Just when the moon sits crooked. That didn't make any sense to me then. It does now. I got a room at the roadside motel just past the only stoplight, figuring I'd sleep early and leave at sunrise. But I didn't sleep. Not well, anyway. Something about the way the motel walls sweated, even with the air conditioner, rattling like a dying thing, made the sheets feel sticky and off. I ended up outside around dusk, walking down toward the shoreline. The bay wasn't far. You could smell it before you saw it, mud, algae, and something a little sharper, like wet pennies left out in the sun. The pier was old, slats warped, and nails rusted. It creaked under my weight as I stepped out over the water. The surface was smooth, still, too still, not even a bug ripple. That was the first strange thing. The second was the quiet. No frogs, no birds, not even the buzzing of gnats. It was like the whole place had hit pause. That's when I heard the laughter. High, thin voices, children, giggling, skipping, That kind of sound you hear on schoolyards just before recess ends. I turned and scanned the shoreline, but I was alone. Not a house in sight. Just flat land, some scrub trees, and the sloping road I came down. Then I looked out across the bay, and that's when I saw them. There were 4 of them, maybe 5. Small figures standing on the surface of the water like it was glass. They weren't sinking. They weren't splashing. They were standing. One was bent down, arms swinging back like he was skipping a rock. I watched the stone bounce once, twice, then vanish in the center of the bay with a hollow plop. Another child clapped. Another skipped out. My mind tried to rationalize it, maybe a sandbar? Some illusion? I called out without thinking. Just a dumb. Hey, like you'd shout at kids near your fence. All 5 heads turned at once. That was the third strange thing. Their eyes. I couldn't see faces, but the eyes were wrong. Glowing, pale things like fish bellies flashing under docklight, and the air turned colder. One of them waved. Not a friendly wave, not playful. It was deliberate, like it was beckoning. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how weak the pier felt. Beneath me, the wood groaned. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe it was the way they smiled after that. All of them. Teeth too white, too even. I stood there frozen until the last bit of sunlight bled out over the trees. Then they sank. They didn't walk off or dive. They just lowered, slowly, straight, down into the water like puppets on strings being reeled under. And the surface sealed itself over them, not a ripple left behind. I left the pier in a daze. Didn't tell anyone at the motel. Didn't sleep either. Just sat on the edge of the bed, the sound of their laughter playing over and over in my head. I was gone by 5 a.m., before the sun had even broken the trees, but I didn't stay gone. Curiosity's a damn disease. I started digging library archives, county records, old microfilm in forgotten courthouse basements. That's how I found out about the flood. In 1961. Braxton Bay was a town, not a lake. A farming settlement with a school, a church, 2 bars, and a little bait shop by the dock. They had a dry season so bad it cracked the earth wide open. The county brought in dam workers from Austin, said they'd build a reservoir. Everyone agreed. The bay would bring jobs, water, recreation. But the timeline moved too fast. Way too fast. The townsfolk barely had time to evacuate before the dam. Gates were opened. Most got out. But not all. 20-7 children were still in school the day the waters came. Their teacher tried to get them out. Story goes she kept them in the building too long, waiting for buses that never arrived. By the time the flood reached the schoolhouse, it was too late. Locals say the building cracked apart in the current and the kids were swept away, screaming under the rising brown water. No bodies were ever found. Not a single one. Just the frame of the schoolhouse, 60 feet below the surface now, preserved in mud and silt. Like a sealed tomb. That would have been the end of it if not for the sightings. Every few years, always at dusk, always near the anniversary. Boaters saying they see kids on the water, skipping stones. Laughing, sometimes crying. One man said he saw them holding hands in a circle, just drifting across the water. When he got closer, they vanished. I went back one more time just to see if it would happen again. It was late July. The moon sat low and crooked like Walt had said. I brought a flashlight, a GoPro, even my brother to keep me sane. We took a canoe out near the old coordinates of the schoolhouse. The water turned glassy around 8:40 p.m. At 8:42, the air dropped 20 degrees. No wind, no insects. Just the sound of our breathing and the oars tapping against the boat's edge. At 8:45, they appeared. 6 of them this time, all holding hands. Barefoot, standing on nothing. Their mouths were moving, but I heard no sound until I did. It was soft at first, like static. Then it formed words, rhymes, schoolyard songs. London Bridge and Ring Around the Rosie. They circled, singing that my brother dropped the paddle. I fumbled with the GoPro, but it blinked dead. I swear I charged it. Then one of the children pointed at us, and every single head turned. No eyes this time, just hollow sockets. They began to move toward the canoe dock. We paddled back, hard. Didn't look behind. Not once. When we hit shore, the singing stopped. I've never gone back, but I dream about it. Every week, same dream. I'm back on the pier. The kids are there, and one of them has something in his hand, a rock, maybe, or a tooth. He always drops it in the water. And then he turns to me and says, "We're still waiting for the bell." I didn't understand. Until last week, when I found an old article clipped from the Braxton Daily Post. One of the parents said her son had a school bell he always rang at recess. Brass with a cracked handle. They never recovered it. The article ended with a quote. From her, "I'll never forget it. They won't leave until someone rings that bell. That's how they know it's safe to go home." To be baptized, nothing special, nothing cursed. Or so people believed. That spring had been dry. That's the first odd thing. No storms, no lightning, not even the usual May showers to give the farmers grief. The earth cracked in places, especially around the old dairy fields and the two-lane blacktop leading down into town. But no one panicked. Just one of those Texas dry spells, folks said, happens every few years. Then the ground gives up a crop of fire ants and mesquite weeds, and life goes on. But life didn't go on. It started with a dog. Always a dog, isn't it? Tommy Greeley's red-bone coonhound, Sadie, didn't come home one night. Tommy figured she'd gotten after a raccoon near the creek and bedded down somewhere cool. But the next morning when he found her, Sadie wasn't asleep. She was curled up beside the tire of his truck, her body bloated, soaked like she'd drowned. Problem was, her fur was covered in pale silt, and her eyes, they weren't there anymore. Not gouged, not clawed, just gone. Smooth pink sockets. Like the water had sucked them right out. By the time Tommy staggered into town to tell Sheriff Leckler, water had started bubbling up in his backyard. Not a trickle, not a pipe burst. Just a thick, frothing pool that churned like something was breathing under it. The smell was awful. Not like sewage or dead fish. More like copper and burned hair. The sheriff went out there with a flashlight and a cigarette already hanging from his lips. Tommy swore he saw something moving under the water like a pale shape just beneath the surface. But Leckler waved him off. Sinkhole, he muttered, more to himself than Tommy. Call the county boys. Probably gas or some damn broken well. Except there weren't any wells in that part of Barrow Ridge. By noon, 6 other homes reported water suddenly bubbling up through their yards, not seeping, not leaking, erupting. It came up with force, thick and hot, like it had been held back by something for years. The water wasn't clear either. It was gray, not dirty gray like ash or bone dust swirled in lye. Mrs. Darlene Pruitt said it ate her azaleas in an hour. Said she saw smoke coming from the soil, like the water wasn't wet at all but something caustic, and the smell spread. You didn't need to be close anymore. It clung to your throat and made your gums itch. Made your tongue feel raw, like you'd licked a battery. That evening, the town council met in the community hall, though not everyone made it. By then, the church had already collapsed in on itself. No fire, no storm. It just folded. The beams cracked inward, like pulled by invisible strings. The bell tower sunk halfway into the ground and tilted. A sound came from beneath it, someone said a low groaning, almost human but much deeper dot. Then the floorboards started to steam. It happened fast after that. By sundown, houses were giving out. The water didn't rise like floodwaters should it shot upward from the ground in thick columns, snapping floorboards like matchsticks. The Stroud boy said he saw one of the bursts carry his grandma clean. Through the ceiling before the roof caved in, nobody saw a fire. But there was flame, the worst part. And I mean the part that I still can't explain to myself all these years later is how the water burned. You'd touch it and it would eat through your skin, but no heat, just pain. Deep, molecular pain. Like the water wasn't boiling, it was angry, hungry. It melted fences, scorched tree trunks from the roots up, and left foundation stones glowing red even after the houses were gone. People tried to flee. Of course they did. But the roads didn't work, not in the normal way. Sheriff Leckler was one of the first to try, and he took the Greeley boy with him. They tore out of town in his cruiser, headed for Route 9. But 20 minutes later, they came barreling back in from the other direction, bloodied, eyes wide, screaming about something crawling up the blacktop behind them. He never explained what and if, and he saw none of the cars started after that. None of the radios worked, no calls went out, no one came in. The town just turned in on itself, folded like wet paper. And the worst was the night. It was what came with it. Some said it was voices, but not quite. More like breath. Slow, sucking inhalations rising from the soil, a rhythm, a lullaby without sound. You'd feel it in your ribs before you heard it in your ears. And when it got loud enough, your vision blurred. Your thoughts drifted. You'd wake up standing in your front yard, barefoot, staring at the bubbling earth like it was calling you home. I was 17. My cousin Rebecca and I had just come up from Houston to visit her aunt, my great-aunt June, who lived near the edge of town. The only reason we survived is because her house sat on a limestone bluff just high enough to keep the water at bay. For an extra hour. That hour saved us. The last thing I remember from that night is my great-aunt standing on the back porch, barefoot in her nightgown, whispering something to the soil. Her face was blank. No fear, no anger, just peace. She stepped off the edge like the water had called her name. Rebecca screamed. I tried to hold her back, but something pulled at her too. The whispering was in her bones. We made it to the tree line. We didn't look back. In the morning, rescue crews came in from Newton and Hemphill, thinking they were looking for tornado damage. That's what the call had said, though nobody could trace where it came from. The phones were still dead, but someone, somewhere, sent word. They found nothing. Barrow Ridge was gone. Not destroyed, not washed away. Just not there. No smoke. No rubble. The road ended in a stretch of wet gravel. No remains. No vehicles, no houses. Just a smooth basin filled with faintly steaming water, shimmering under the sun like oil on. A skillet. They called it a sinkhole, though no one could explain why the trees stopped exactly at the edge or why the birds never flew over it. And the water? Samples were taken. No one ever published the results. The place is still there. If you know the right back roads through the piney woods, you'll find it. No signs, no warnings. Just that same basin still bubbling slightly even after all these years. Nothing grows near it. No frogs, no bugs, not even mold. Sometimes, when the wind's just right, you can smell that scorched metal scent again, just faintly. And if you're real unlucky, if you lean too close, you'll hear it. That breathing. Slow, patient, steady. Like something underneath is still waiting, still whispering. It started with a letter, yellowed at the edges but clean where it mattered, the kind of envelope that felt too crisp to be real. The address was handwritten in smooth blue ink, with a name that hadn't been used since the year Texas declared Glen Wade uninhabitable. When Marie Olson saw her mother's familiar looping cursive on the return address, Eleanor Olson, 114 East Miller Street, Glen Wade, TX 76539, she dropped her coffee across the tile floor and stared at the envelope as if it might disappear. Mother had died in 1966, the same year the dam failed and swallowed Glen Wade whole. Marie was 70 now, a widow with a bad knee and a mostly quiet life in New Braunfels. The letter had arrived on a Monday morning, slipped between an insurance ad and a church newsletter. She only checked the mailbox twice a week and never expected anything but bills. It was the Glen Wade stamp that froze her breath in her chest. Dated June 18, 1966, the day her mother drowned. She opened the letter slowly, her fingers trembling in that strange, half-familiar way that only happens when something ancient knocks on your life with gentle knuckles. The paper inside was creamy, unwrinkled, and smelled faintly of lilacs, her mother's favorite soap. The message was short. The 11 words, neat and straight across the center of the page. I'm still here, baby. Come pick me up after supper. No signature. No return line. Just that soft scent of flowers and something old, like cedar left to rot. She didn't tell her children about the letter. Not even her eldest, the one who always insisted on knowing her medications and doctor appointments and when she was going to get that mole looked at. Marie tucked the envelope into her Bible between Psalms and Lamentations and didn't sleep for 2 days. Then on the third morning, she drove. Left the house before sunrise, not bothering with breakfast or her pillbox. She hadn't been to Glen Wade since the flood. No one had. The Army Corps had deemed it too unstable to rebuild. Some of the old folks said the town still sat beneath the water, intact, as if waiting. Others said it had been demolished completely, that the weight of water and time had cracked every brick and split every beam. But there were always whispers, campers hearing bells underwater, divers who swore they saw traffic lights still changing color below the surface, a red bicycle frozen against a school fence. Marie took the back roads, like her mother always preferred. It was over 2 hours before she reached the old Glen Wade overlook, where the cracked pavement ended and the view stretched out over a shimmering, still expanse of water surrounded by pine and scrub oak. Lake Terrell, they called it now. It looked too calm to hold a ghost. The parking lot was empty. Of course it was. And yet Marie felt the hush of company. She walked toward the guardrail. Wind stirred the reeds. The lake lapped softly against the earth, as if breathing. And then, just as she leaned forward to rest her hand on the rusted metal rail, she saw it, a white envelope. Sitting on the ground, not 6 inches from her left foot. No footprints. No car nearby. But the envelope was real. Real as her heartbeat, which felt suddenly like thunder inside her ribs. The return address matched the first, Eleanor Olson, 114 East Miller Street, Glen Wade, TX. No stamp this time. Just a message inside. You're late, sweetheart. Daddy's making cornbread. Hurry. Her knees buckled a little. She looked up, stared out at the lake, tried to blink away the sudden sting in her eyes. It was impossible, all of it. Her mother couldn't be writing letters. The post office was gone, leveled, buried, flooded. She'd seen the pictures. She remembered the black bags and the boats and the men with their mouths set in grim, watery lines, but the letter didn't lie, and neither did. The feeling in her chest, deep and aching and full of something heavier than grief. Marie climbed the barrier. Slowly, stiffly, but with purpose. There was a narrow path to the shore, worn thin from deer or foolish teenagers or something else. The kind of trail that shouldn't be there, but was. As she walked it, the air grew cooler, thicker, like she was descending into a different season. Summer dulled around her. The birdsong faded. Her shoes squelched in soft mud. She came to the edge of the water and saw the post. Not a dock, not a pier, a post. Wooden, about chest high, and planted firmly in the shallows. And nailed to it a mailbox. Old, rusted, red paint peeling. The flag up. Marie stepped into the lake. It should have been cold, but it wasn't. Should have sucked her shoes off, but it didn't. It felt warm, familiar, like bath water from childhood. She waded in until the water hit her hips. Opened the mailbox. Inside was another letter, the same scent of lilacs. She opened it right there, water sloshing at her waist. We've set the table. Will. Wait until the lightning starts. Bring dessert. She dropped the letter. It didn't float. Then a voice, clear, female, older, but not frail. From across the water, Marie, don't forget the peaches. Marie turned so fast she nearly lost her footing. There, far across the lake, was a porch light, faint, flickering, like a house halfway through memory. And next to it, a shape. A woman in a yellow dress, waving. Marie didn't remember walking deeper, but suddenly she was chest deep, then neck deep. Her feet felt no bottom. Her body didn't resist. She heard laughter. A man's chuckle. Her father's, maybe. He used to tap the table twice when he passed the mashed potatoes. She remembered that. And the smell of cornbread with jalapeño. Then the light vanished. The water was dark again, and she was gone. 2 days later, a ranger at the Glenwade Overlook found Marie's car with the door open, keys still in the ignition. Her purse was on the seat. A Bible lay on the dashboard, open to Lamentations. Inside it, the envelope had gone blank. The ink was gone, but the paper smelled faintly of lilacs. No one could explain the letter that showed up in a rural route. Mailbox 4 towns over the next week. No return address this time, just a familiar handwriting and a new message. I got dessert. She's safe now. Love, Mom. Stamped Glenwade, TX, June 30th, 1966. Postmarked 59 years late. Delivered on time. They said the Brazos hadn't flooded that bad since 27, but the river didn't care about numbers or warnings. When it came that spring in Hesper, Texas, it came like it remembered every slight, every dam, every ditch that tried to tame it. Whole streets vanished under cold, brown water. Roofs floated like boats and cattle drowned tethered to fence posts. Most folks blamed the storm. What else can you blame when you're chest deep in river water that don't belong there? But there were others who remembered what was under the paint. I was 16 when the flood took Hesper. It's gone now, scrubbed from new maps, barely a footnote in the county archives. But before the water came, before the sky even darkened, something else had been warning us. Not the news, not the weather service. Something older. Something carved into the town itself. We moved into our house on Travis Street the summer before it all happened. My dad had taken a job at the grain elevator, and Mom said the house was a steal. That should have been the first clue. It was too. Cheap, too quiet, and too full of that wrong kind of stillness. I remember stepping through the front door for the first time and thinking it smelled like something that had been buried too long. 2 weeks in, we started scraping paint. The walls inside were a mess, peeling in strips like sunburned skin, and Dad wanted everything fresh before fall. We were working in the back bedroom when I saw it. A phrase, shallow but deliberate, scratched into the drywall beneath 2 coats. A faded green. They float on rotten wood. I remember it exactly because I stopped scraping and just stared. The letters were carved backwards, like someone had written them while facing a mirror. Jagged, uneven, like they'd been done in a rush. Or with shaking hands. I told Dad and he laughed it off. Said it was probably some kid messing around back in the 70s, maybe even a prank. Still, he told me to get the spackle and cover it, and I did. But I kept thinking about it. Then more started to show up. In the kitchen, behind the old pantry shelves. Bones hold the floor down. In the crawl space under the porch. The water doesn't. Stay dead. And the one that made my mother cry when she saw it, in the living room, scrawled deep behind the paneling. The walls don't work. By the end of that September, we'd found over 20 messages. All scratched deep, always backwards, always in the same rough, panic-rushed script. Some longer than others. Some etched so deep into plaster and brick you'd think whoever did it had nothing but time and fear. We weren't the only ones. Our neighbor, Miss Lantry, who'd lived in Hesper all her life, started whispering about things she remembered from her childhood, like her mother yelling at her not to play near the east side lots where the town's first houses used to be. Because the foundations bleed, she said once, when she forgot to take her pills. People laughed, like they always do when someone old starts talking in riddles. But then the Rodriguezes found similar carvings in their attic, and the Hales uncovered a dozen beneath their staircase phrases like "we didn't listen" and "IT never left." Still, no one left town. Not really. A few said they'd go stay with relatives or take short trips out to Waco or Abilene, but they came back. It's like something pulled them back in, pulled us back in. The air was heavy, like the whole town was waiting for something, and didn't want anyone to miss it. March rolled around and the ground stayed soft. Too soft. I'd take one step in the backyard and feel the earth give beneath my heel like dough. The trees, pecans, and water oaks started leaning, bending like they were being tugged from beneath. Dad said it was poor drainage, but the dog Misty, a mutt who barked at fence posts, stopped going near the far edge of the yard. She just stood by the door and whined, even when I dragged her leash out. One night, I saw her clawing at the floorboards in the hallway like something was moving underneath. That was the same night we heard the voices in the vent, whispers, dry and low, like dead leaves skimming across concrete. No words I could make out, but they were there. Mom didn't hear them. She had started wearing earplugs at night because Dad snored like a freight train. But I lay awake and listened to that hissing murmur crawl through the ductwork until I passed out from exhaustion. A week before the flood, the carvings began to change. No longer just phrases. Whole sentences. Descriptions. Some of them made no sense. Others did. The man in the attic stares at the wall because it still breathes. They opened the basement and forgot what their names were. When the bell rings again, hold your breath or the water will crawl inside. It was always backwards, always deep, always where you didn't want to find it. I started dreaming of a town that didn't have a sky, just boards nailed over the clouds. People walked in silence with mouths full of silt, eyes black as rusted nails. I woke up shaking every morning, and I wasn't alone. Kids at school were quieter, paler. Mr. Denton, our history teacher, had a breakdown during roll call. He kept repeating the word seepage until the principal led him away. He was never seen again, and then came April 3rd. The flood didn't begin like normal floods. No storm, no days of warning, no buildup. It started with a hum in the ground. My dad said it was a transformer. My mom said it was nothing. But I swear I saw the living room wall pulse like it exhaled. By noon, water erupted from the soil. Not rain, not river overflow. It just came up like the ground was coughing. From the drains, from the baseboards, from the cracks beneath the tides, the sink. Dark, cold water with bits of hair and bark and things I couldn't identify. I remember running down the hall and slipping because the rug had floated. Outside, neighbors screamed. I saw Miss Lantry on her porch, holding a crucifix and sobbing. Water surged up her steps in seconds. It moved too fast. It wasn't natural. It didn't feel like a bowl it swallowed. The houses didn't drift away, they sank. One by one, roofs vanished beneath. The surface, like a hand, was pushing down from above. We made it to the old grain silo on the edge of town. My dad still had keys. A few others were there too, maybe 12 of us. We watched Hesper disappear from a catwalk 30 feet up, and even then the water reached the lower railings within the hour. I saw something floating toward the mill and nearly threw myself over the side. It wasn't a body. Not exactly. It looked like someone had built a mannequin out of driftwood and tarps and nailed human teeth into its face. It turned as it passed and looked at me. There was no current, no wind, but it turned. We stayed there for 2 nights. No help came. Radios only hissed, phones were dead, and the whispers came back. Not through vents this time, through the walls themselves. Through the grain, through the rivets. You could press your ear to the metal and hear the same damn voice over and over again. The water never forgets. Eventually the water receded, but by then, it didn't matter. Hesper was gone. The bodies they recovered were wrong. Bloated in ways that didn't make sense. Bones bent backwards. Eyes sealed over. The town was deemed a biohazard zone, sealed off, and quietly erased. We moved to Temple with what little we had. My mother doesn't speak of Hesper. Dad drinks. More than he should. And me? I dream of the writings. Every new apartment I move into, I check the walls. I scrape the paint. Not all the way, just enough to see if something's there. Last week, in a cheap duplex off Highway 36, I found a phrase. Behind the bathroom mirror. It was backward. Etched deep. It followed you. They say the water at Marlin Bend doesn't sleep, and maybe it's true. It's not a loud place, not like you'd expect when you hear talk of haunted ruins or cursed lakes. Marlin Bend just lies there, quiet and flat, especially after sunset. Like it's listening. That's the word old-timers use, listening. Not watching, not whispering. Listening. The kind of quiet that makes your own breath sound rude, like a trespass. I never believed any of it, not really. I'd heard the stories from my uncle, and from the Mexican workers who'd come up seasonally to fish and net and clear the reeds for quick cash. They'd say the same thing every year: don't sleep on the docks. Not there, not if you don't. When something crawling into your dreams and rearranging the furniture inside your head. I'd laugh it off when I was younger. People say all kinds of shit around the fire when they're drinking warm beer and gutting catfish. But this last summer, I stayed at the Bend myself. Not on purpose, not at first. I took a job doing waterline inspections for an independent firm. Out of Temple. Easy stuff. Waiters, drone footage, some soil sampling. Most of it was boring, muddy, and mosquito-bitten work, nothing worth telling stories about. But the Marlin Bend portion had been off the books for a while. Something about unstable foundations, insurance issues, low activity. It didn't matter to me. The pay was double for sites like that, and I needed the money. The dock itself was a rotted skeleton of what used to be a marina back in the 50s, when Marlin Bend was still alive. There'd been a flash flood in '62 that changed everything, wiped out most of the town, rerouted the river's path, and left the dock floating in no man's land. Some parts of the town were still under shallow water when I arrived. If the light hit just right, you could see the corners of rooftops under the surface, algae draped and warped with age. My drone even picked up something that looked like a church steeple. Just a jagged spike of rusted metal barely breaching. The surface like the fin of a sleeping shark. That first day went normal. Took samples. Checked sediment levels. Avoided snakes. But by the time I packed up and looked at the clock, it was past 9. I didn't want to drive the 3 hours back in the dark, so I figured I'd pitch my hammock between the posts of the broken dock and crash there for the night. The air was still, just that kind of sticky stillness you get when the heat lingers. Past sundown. I didn't even notice how quiet it was until I tried to fall asleep. No cicadas, no frogs, no owls. Just the slow slap of water licking the dock in rhythm, like something pacing under the surface. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. But it wasn't the usual snap awake you get when a bug crawls on your face or your bladder kicks in. It was slower than that, like surfacing out of thick syrup. My mouth was dry, and I couldn't remember what had woken me. I sat up in the hammock and looked around. The moon was low, fat, and yellow and dim like it had been dipped in dust. I saw my truck parked on the gravel shoulder about 40 feet away, and I could see the outline of my gear piled beside it. Everything looked exactly as it should, but the water looked wrong. I didn't hear it anymore. Not the gentle waves, not the wind. It was flat as a photograph, not still flat. Like someone had laid a mirror over it, only the reflection wasn't quite right. The stars didn't shimmer like they should have. They held perfectly still in that black surface, too sharp, too orderly. Like they were drawn there, not real. Then I saw the boat dot. It was maybe 20 feet from the dock, half shrouded in mist. I hadn't seen it earlier, and I would have noticed it was a small wooden rowboat, old and narrow, the kind with a single lantern pole hanging off the bow. Only there was no light, just the outline. No ripples around it either, just there, floating, like it was waiting. I don't know why, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. Something about the shape of it made the hair on my arms rise. It was too narrow for any grown man. And I kept thinking about those stories about fishermen who slept too close to the town ruins and came back not quite themselves. Or not at all. Then came the smell. Wet wood, but not the kind you get near a dock. This was moldy, spoiled, like rotting driftwood that had been soaked in blood. I swear to God it was metallic, sharp, like rusted iron under your tongue. I turned to check my pack, thinking maybe something had spilled, but when I looked back, the boat was gone, just gone. I didn't hear it row away. I didn't hear a splash. The water didn't even move. I don't remember falling asleep again, but I must have, because the next thing I remember, it was morning, but everything felt wrong. I was sweating bullets, shaking even though the sun was out. My hands were dirty, caked in mud up to the wrists. But the dock was dry. I hadn't stepped off it. I checked my boots clean. But my fingernails were cracked and blackened with soil. I looked at my gear. My drone was missing. The tripod was bent. My phone wouldn't power on, even after charging. I wrote it all off as maybe sleepwalking, maybe a fever dream from heat stroke or something. But I couldn't stop thinking about the boat, or the flat water, or the smell. I drove back that morning and I told my supervisor I was sick. But I couldn't rest. I started having dreams always the same. I'm back on the dock. The boat's there. This time there's someone in it. A kid. But too thin, pale. Its head's wrong, too smooth, like the hair was shaved off, and the skin's stretched too tight. It doesn't speak. It just stares with these huge black eyes like whetstones. It drifts closer every time I dream. Last night, it reached the dock dot, and now I can't sleep at all. Because I'm afraid that if I fall asleep again, I won't wake up alone. I've started hearing water in my apartment. Trickles behind the walls, and I don't live near water. The drains gurgle when I'm not using them. There's a film of wetness on my bathroom floor every morning. Last week, I coughed up a bit of river mud. I'm telling you this because I don't know who else will listen. Maybe you think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I went back to that dock yesterday. I had to see if the town ruins were really there. If I made it all up. But when I got there was no dock dot, just open water dot, no sign of where I'd camped. No posts, no path. The GPS wouldn't even lock onto the site. Just open water. Still and flat as glass. I swear it listened when I stood there. I swear the breeze that hit my back wasn't breeze at all, but breath. So I'm begging you, if you go near Marlin Bend, if you fish near the ruins or anchor anywhere close, don't sleep. Don't even blink for too long. Don't trust the water, because if it listens long enough, it remembers you. And it doesn't let go. Not really. Not ever. They say the Sabine River never runs clean below St. Delilah's Bend, not since the flood of '62. Most people alive today weren't around back then, and those who were tend to change the subject or leave the room when it's brought up. I didn't grow up in Marsh Glen, but I married into it. My wife Lorna's family has roots here stretching back to before the Civil War. Her granddaddy helped build the original church, and her mother used to walk 3 miles barefoot just to attend Sunday service. She never missed a sermon, not until the river came knocking, and didn't stop until it swallowed the whole damn steeple. They say the congregation was inside when it happened, and the choir was mid-hymn. What the papers don't say is what the folks around here believe, that something was waiting under that church. Something that wanted out. I first heard the bell myself in October 1987, my 3rd year living in Marsh Glen. Lorna and I had just finished dinner when the wind outside shifted, carrying something strange with it. A low, hollow clanging that came in regular intervals, muffled like it was underwater. At first, I thought it was just someone ringing a cowbell down by the east pasture, but Lorna froze in the middle of drying a plate. Her face went pale. She looked at me like a child about to confess something awful. "That's the bell," she whispered. "It's St. Delilah's. You hear it every October, when the river gets hungry again." I didn't sleep much that night. Neither did she. That part of the river is slower than the rest, muddy, wide, and shallow in the dry seasons. But come autumn, it thickens and climbs like it's being pulled upward by something invisible. The old bridge crossing near the church ruins was condemned years ago. A few kids drowned out there trying to film ghost videos for the local paper, but no one found the bodies. Just shoes on the rocks and a busted camcorder tangled in driftwood. I didn't believe in the stories, not at first. I was a practical man, raised in Midland, schooled in concrete and contracts, not curses and spirits. But then October 13th came around again, and that year, the bell rang louder. It started just after sunset. The sky was redder than usual, smeared like blood across the clouds. I was out near the back shed grabbing the last of the firewood when I heard it again, metal on metal, deep and slow. Not frantic like a fire alarm, but measured, almost deliberate. A warning. I turned toward the sound and my body locked up. Not fear exactly. Something deeper, older, like recognition. Like something inside me already knew what it meant. I followed. The sound out past the fence line, through the woods, down the trail that led to the overlook. You can't see the church from there. St. Delilah's was lost years ago. The whole structure collapsed when the flood tore through the valley, but people still call it the hill where the bell cries. That's where I saw the lights. Not flashlights, not lanterns. Flickering shapes in the trees. Pale, tall, slow-moving. They floated more than walked, weaving through the fog rising off the water. I stood frozen behind a dead pecan tree, heart thudding like a drum. The lights gathered near the riverbank, where the old stone steps used to lead down to the church door. Then the water moved. Not just ripples or waves, but a swell like something massive had rolled just beneath the surface. And from somewhere deep below, the bell rang again. Once. Twice. A third time. And then silence. I left Lorna asleep and drove into town the next morning, shaking and silent. I stopped by the gas station where her Uncle Ronnie worked the register. I told him what I saw. He didn't ask questions. He just walked to the back cooler, pulled out a bottle of Old Crow, and handed it to me without a word. Then he leaned in and said, They say the devil was chained beneath that church. Some old preacher down from Arkansas has put him there. Buried the bell deep in limestone so if he ever got loose, the sound would call him back down. That's when I remembered something Lorna's grandmother once said at a family cookout. Half drunk and swatting flies, the bell don't call to us, it calls to him. I thought she meant God. Now I wasn't so sure. That night I stayed up, with a pair of binoculars and an old hunting rifle. Not that either would have helped. The fog rolled in around 11, thick and heavy. By midnight the bell had returned, louder, closer. But it wasn't just ringing anymore, it was tolling with rhythm like speech. It rang once, then again. Then 3 quick strikes, then silence. Then the pattern repeated. I don't know Morse code, but I swear on my life it was trying to say something. On the 3rd night, Marsh Glen went dark. All the power, all the phones, even the radios. Dead silence. Except for the bell. We found 3 bodies the next morning. All of them near the riverbank. All of them twisted wrong, like something had picked them up and slammed them down without bothering to check for bones. One of them was a local pastor, Reverend Hafford. He'd been organizing a petition to rebuild the church in spirit and in stone. The other 2 were the mayor's son and his girlfriend, teenagers. Probably dared each other to go ring the bell. Only there is no bell to ring. Not anymore. Divers tried going down back in '78 to locate the remains of the church. One made it down 40 feet and came up screaming. He never spoke again. Just sat in a state hospital out near Jasper, drawing circles and chains in crayon until he died. The lead diver who went in after him found nothing. No bell, no altar, no pews. Just a crater in the riverbed and a faint vibration in the water. That rattled his oxygen tank. They say something's growing in that hollow now. Something that pulses. Lorna doesn't like to talk about it, but she started locking every door and window in the house when October hits. And every year, just before Halloween, we find fresh scratches on the inside of our cellar door. Always the same pattern, 3 vertical marks, 1 horizontal, like a tally. This year, there were 7 sets. She's pregnant now. I haven't told her yet, but last night I heard something new. Not the bell. Not exactly. It was a voice. Low, almost kind, whispering through the baby monitor from the nursery. Even though it wasn't turned on. It said, "Born of water, raised in stone. Ring me free." I know now the bell was never meant to warn us. It was meant to wake him. And now something has, asterisk,